Are you really married? Well, what? What do you mean? I had hired a private detective for an investigation. When I received the report, I couldn't hide my shock at the unexpected revelation. If my husband Andrew was taking advantage of my night shifts to do whatever he pleased, I would never forgive him. My name is Melissa. I work as a nurse at a general hospital. And in 2 months, I'll be celebrating my first Christmas since getting married. Andrew, who is 5 years older than me, and I got married 6 months ago. He's a very kind man. We met at a party and hit it off right away. We got married after dating for 4 years. Andrew's parents had already passed away, and he has no close relatives, so we decided to skip the wedding ceremony and settled for just a photo wedding. He works as a regional manager for a retail chain. He's mostly stationed at a branch, but sometimes has to go to the head office for meetings or travel to various stores. Since we don't have children yet, I thought I should take advantage of the time to earn more, so I requested to be scheduled primarily for night shifts. This way, I could enjoy my days off after my shifts, and night shifts count as 2 days' work, so I actually get more free time compared to other jobs. Andrew's work schedule didn't have fixed days off, but he often arranged his days off to match mine. We enjoyed short trips and dates, and our newlywed life was going smoothly. One day, after coming home from a night shift, I found Andrew at home, even though he should have been at work. I'm home. Andrew, isn't today a work day for you? I asked, puzzled. Well, Andrew replied, looking uncomfortable. I've got an urgent business trip starting tomorrow. It's going to be a long one, so I was given the day off today. Oh, really? How long will you be gone? About a week, I think, but it might be longer. I won't know for sure until I get there. I see. Good luck with your work. I felt downhearted by the sudden news of his extended business trip. I had the next 2 days off, and I had been looking forward to spending them with him. But if it's for work, there's nothing I could do about it. So I decided to take him to the airport. The drive to the airport was about 2 hours. A flight to his company's head office in Boston would take around 2 more hours. After seeing Andrew off, I took some time to explore the airport and had lunch at a famous nearby cafe before heading back home. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the sofa. That's when I noticed an unfamiliar envelope under the TV stand. I figured it must have been something he forgot for his trip. Feeling a bit guilty, I opened it to check. Inside, I found an album with pictures of Andrew and a woman I didn't recognize. Alongside them was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a preschool uniform, standing at the entrance of a school. What is this? My mind went completely blank. Could it be an affair? And with a single mother, I couldn't forgive him. An affair. As that word flashed through my mind, I found myself calling Andrew's company without even realizing it. I told them I was an acquaintance of Andrew's and asked for a reason to check if he was actually on a business trip. To my shock, they informed me that Andrew was on bereavement leave. Moreover, the company rarely sends employees on trips from branch offices to the headquarters. I was told, "What's going on?" He told me he was going on a business trip, but he's on bereavement leave. I hadn't heard a word about that. It seemed clear that Andrew was lying, taking time off from work just to meet this woman and child from the photos. Fueled by anger, I started looking for a private detective agency. I found one that seemed promising and scheduled an appointment for the next day. Still, the fact remained there hadn't been any business trips, and for 4 years, from the moment we started dating until now, Andrew had been lying to me. A deep sense of emptiness washed over me. Exhausted from it all, I must have fallen asleep without realizing it. When I woke up, it was 6 o'clock. I had an appointment with the detective at 10 o'clock, so I got ready and carefully placed the envelope I found yesterday into a large bag, making sure it wouldn't get bent. At the appointed time, I entered a detective agency for the first time in my life. I had planned what to say, but the moment I opened a door, I forgot everything. What greeted me was a man who looked to be in his mid-20s, casually dressed, like a college student. Sensing my thoughts about how young he seemed, he smiled warmly and said, "Were you thinking I look like a pretty unreliable private detective?" His disarming smile lightened the mood. "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I've just never been to a place like this before, so I'm a bit nervous," I answered quickly, as he motioned for me to sit on the couch. After a bit of small talk, I pulled out the album from the envelope that had sparked my suspicions of Andrew's affair. As expected of a professional, the detective efficiently began making copies of the necessary evidence. He held up a copy of the photo with the three of them in front of the preschool. "This could be a crucial lead," he said. The preschool's name was clearly visible in the picture. The detective immediately looked up the preschool online and made a phone call. He stepped into another room to make the call, so I couldn't hear how he obtained the information. But it turned out that the little girl in the photo was indeed a student at that preschool. However, the detective also found out that the girl hadn't been attending recently. The detective told me that they would begin a pre-investigation to time their inquiry with when the girl starts attending school again. Since the preschool was located in Boston, I was informed that the investigation fee would be quite high, but I agreed. Actually, after becoming an adult, I developed an interest in stock and FX trading and have been studying them. Once I started working, I began investing part of my salary, and thanks to some decent returns, I was able to fund this investigation. Boston was a flight away, and I had no idea how many days it might take to uncover the evidence. But the fact that my husband was lying to me was the ultimate humiliation. I was determined to find the truth, no matter what. The private detective believed that once he returned, the little girl would also start going back to preschool. From the next day, I went about my usual work routine. Of course, I returned the entire contents of the envelope back to where I had found it. Then, just as Andrew initially said he'd be away for a week, he contacted me. "Sorry, the trip's been extended by 3 days. I'll be back on Sunday." As planned, I contacted the private detective on the day Andrew returned. The detective responded enthusiastically, saying, "Got it." The next day, he flew to Boston to begin his preliminary investigation. That evening, I received a phone call from the private detective, and he dropped an unbelievable bombshell on me. During the preliminary investigation, something unexpected came to light. "What? What do you mean?" I had no idea what was going on. "I'll be back tomorrow. Is there a day soon when we can meet?" "Yes, as soon as possible," I replied. The next morning, after my night shift, I headed straight to the detective's office. "Was it an affair?" I asked anxiously. The private detective, looking uncomfortable, gave a hesitant reply. "No, I think it's more serious than that." His face was so grave that I couldn't utter a word. "First, it seems true that your husband used bereavement leave to take time off from work. But are you sure you're actually married?" "What? Of course, we got married 6 months ago." "Well, I tracked down Andrew's home after following him and his daughter from the preschool. According to the neighbors, he's been living there alone for the past 4 years, only returning to Boston a few times a year. It seems he was in Boston for about a week for the funeral of his wife's grandfather." No way. I was speechless. At this point, I can't say for sure, but I'd suggest you check your marriage records at the city office, the private detective advised. I thanked him and immediately went to the city office. At the office, I asked for my marriage records. What I saw there left me shocked. No, this has to be a mistake. We got married 6 months ago. I was completely confused and found myself raising my voice at the female employee at the counter. The staff member looked troubled and responded, "I'm sorry, but no marriage record has been found, even after checking." Still, I refused to give up and pleaded, "Please, check again properly. My husband's name is Andrew. I'm begging you." The staff member, seeing how close I was to tears, kept apologizing profusely, looking genuinely sorry. Amidst my confusion, I recalled the day we registered our marriage at the city office. Since we didn't have a wedding ceremony, we had a civil ceremony at the office to make it official. It never crossed my mind that our marriage registration might not have been completed. After shedding a few tears, I gradually calmed down. Apologizing in turn, I left the city office. I couldn't help thinking, lately, all I felt after my night shifts is exhaustion. When I got home, I slumped down on the sofa, deep in thought about what to do next, and ended up falling asleep. When I woke up, I saw Andrew in the kitchen making dinner. Watching him, I couldn't help but remember the woman and the little girl in the pictures. Even though the anger of realizing I was being deceived didn't subside, I knew I needed to keep my composure. If I lost control, I wouldn't be able to get what I needed. So I managed to keep my emotions in check. From that day on, I made a conscious effort to smile and act normal in front of him. About a week had passed since my visit to the city office. In that time, I had been thinking of ways to investigate Andrew's first wife, either by checking his smartphone or through his acquaintances. Andrew often forgot things, and that day, by chance, he had left his smartphone at home when he went out. Since I had the day off, I considered taking it to him, but before that, I decided to check his phone. Normally, looking through someone else's smartphone without permission is wrong, but this wasn't the time to worry about such things. If I didn't do something, my mental state wouldn't hold up. I had no other choice. Andrew would sometimes say his passcode out loud while unlocking his phone, so it wasn't hard to get in. From there, I found a contact information for the woman whose profile picture showed the little girl from the photos. I immediately called her. By the third ring, "Hello, who is this?" a calm and refined woman's voice answered. I responded, "Are you Andrew's wife?" Her tone instantly shifted from polite to suspicious. "Yes, I am." "And who are you?" "I'm someone who met Andrew while he was living away from home. I'm sorry to say this, but we've been living together." So there was a woman at his assignment. "I see. Well, I was planning to visit my husband's family, who lives near you, over the New Year's holidays. Could we meet and talk then?" This was an unexpected turn of events for me. I gladly accepted her generous offer. Around that time, Andrew said to me, "Sorry, but I'll be heading back home for a high school reunion over New Year's." I had been waiting for him to say this. Naturally, I gave him the go-ahead immediately. According to what I'd learned from Andrew's first wife, his hometown was in the next town over. He had told me that both of his parents had passed away, and that he had no living relatives, but in reality, both of his parents were alive and still living in that neighboring town. With just a month left until the new year, I decided to find a lawyer specializing in relationship disputes and plan a thorough way to hold him accountable. For the next month, I interacted with Andrew as usual, though it was emotionally taxing for me. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. I told him that I'd be working a night shift on the 30th. "Take care and have a happy new year," I said with a smile before leaving the house. Of course, I had already explained the situation to my workplace, and had taken time off from December 30th to January 2nd. I stayed at a business hotel on the 30th, and on the morning of the 31st, I went to meet Andrew's first wife. As expected from her photo, she was an elegant woman. Her name was Catherine, and she had married Andrew 6 years ago. Together, they had a 4-year-old daughter, the same girl in the photo I had seen. After briefly sharing our stories, we set the plan in motion. Catherine had traveled all the way from Boston with her parents and her daughter, flying out specifically for this, since the conversation we were about to have was not something for young ears. She had left her daughter with her mother, waiting at the hotel. Catherine, her father, and I then headed to Andrew's parents' house. Catherine had already spoken to Andrew's parents in advance, and I was taken aback when they immediately offered me a deep apology upon seeing me. Then, as planned, at around sunset on the 31st, Andrew opened a living room door at his parents' house. "I'm home. Welcome back." The one who greeted him with a smile wasn't his parents or Catherine, but me. The color drained from Andrew's face when he saw me. "What the hell are you doing here?" Facing a shocked Andrew. "What's going on here? Weren't you married to me?" I calmly replied with a smile. "Well, this is," Andrew stammered, completely paralyzed by the situation. At that moment, Catherine, her father, and Andrew's parents all appeared. Every one of them was glaring at Andrew with faces full of anger. Catherine began speaking softly. "So how do you explain this, Andrew? When our child was born, we needed help from my parents, so you went to live away from home for a while. But then you had an affair and led a double life like this." Catherine spoke so calmly, yet her words sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I truly felt fortunate that we were on the same side. I added to the pressure, driving my point home. "Andrew, you were supposedly on business trips, but you were meeting with your family the whole time. Why did you come to me when you were already married? Did you think I'd be easy to fool? This is marriage fraud. You're the worst kind of person, a real piece of scum. And when I checked with your company about your so-called trips, they said you barely travel at all. You've got a beautiful wife and such a sweet little daughter. What were you thinking?" I must have been a complete fool to believe a word you said. Cornered by two furious women, Andrew sighed and then suddenly burst out laughing. "How did you catch on? Living a double life was pretty fun while it lasted. Especially with Melissa, it was so easy to fool you. With all your night shifts, I had free rein to do whatever I wanted." Hearing this, Andrew's mother, who claimed she hadn't raised him to be this way, punched him square in the face. As Andrew looked up, I added, "That's right. You had 3 other mistresses besides me, didn't you?" I said, holding up photos as evidence. Panicking, Andrew shouted, "What the hell is this? Are you stalking me? I'll sue you. This is proof from the private detective I hired when I suspected you were cheating. You're going to pay both Catherine and me compensation," I said firmly. Suddenly, he started apologizing. "Please, I'm begging you, don't make me pay compensation. I'll keep things as they are with both of you. Just don't take my money," he cried, pleading. I was too dumbfounded to speak, but after listening to him, I realized he'd been spending all his money on his mistresses and didn't have any left. "That was none of my concern. I don't want to speak to you again. We'll settle everything through our lawyers," I said, leaving his parents' house behind me. After that, I filed a claim for compensation through my lawyer. I'm grateful that the money came through. Out of a sense of guilt toward Catherine, I offered to give her a portion of the compensation, but she politely refused. Instead, she thanked me for providing so much evidence, and we surprisingly became friends. From what Catherine told me later, She also received compensation from Andrew's other girlfriends and divorced him. Of course, she made sure to get both the compensation and child support she deserved. Apparently, one of his mistresses was a coworker, and as a result, he was demoted and transferred to a subsidiary company. There, he was treated horribly by younger workers and spent his days in tears. Yet, with the compensation payments hanging over him, he couldn't afford to quit, no matter how tough things got. As for me, I moved out of the house we used to share and found a smaller, more comfortable place just for me. Now I enjoy my freedom and a peaceful life. A few times a year, I travel to Boston and continue to stay in touch with Catherine and her daughter. Come on, it's probably not an important task anyway. Join this meeting right now. The harsh voice coming from the other side of the phone made something snap inside me. I had managed to comply with this man's unreasonable demands so far, but now my patience had reached its limit. I swore to myself in secret that I would get back at him one day. My name is Mike, 30 years old. My highest level of education is a high school diploma. I decided not to go to college and started working to support my sick mother and raise my sister, who is 10 years younger than me. My homeroom teacher, at the time, Mr. Brown, was very disappointed when I told him that I would be working straight out of high school. Don't worry, I'll help you with your job search. It's a real shame for someone as smart as you to stop at high school, but I understand your family situation, he said. Mr. Brown was also the advisor for the club I belonged to. He knew about my family's circumstances and always looked out for me. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I owe my current position to him. Thanks to Mr. Brown's support, I was able to land a job at a fairly large local company. The company had many branches nationwide, and I was assigned to the planning department at the head office. The planning department often collaborated with the sales department, so I frequently interacted with the people there. Recently, a new director was appointed to the sales department from one of the regional branches. The previous director of the head office's sales department had retired early last year to take care of his wife, who had fallen seriously ill. She was his only family. The next candidate for director was a recently promoted manager, but he was still quite young. Because of this, the company decided to bring in a new director from one of the branches. Christopher, who became the new director, had reportedly been achieving outstanding results in the branch's sales department and had received recognition for his work. Additionally, it seemed that Christopher had a strong relationship with the company's executive director, who had recommended him for the role. On the day of the formal announcement, during lunch, I was in the company cafeteria chatting with Robert from the sales department about the new director. I worked closely with Robert and often shared meals with him. What kind of person do you think he is? I murmured. Robert gave me a smile full of hope. I hope he's a kind boss. Yay, me too. However, our expectations were soon betrayed. A week after Christopher's appointment, I went to the cafeteria as usual and found Robert looking worn out. Robert, what's wrong? You look exhausted. Mike, the truth is, Robert told me an unbelievable story about Christopher. Christopher had an extremely arrogant personality, treating his subordinates with a high-handed attitude while making things easy for himself. Not only did he push work onto others, but he also complained about the results they produced. There's a rumor that his achievements at the branch were actually due to him taking credit for his subordinates' work. That's awful. Aren't you going to report this to HR? You know he's close with the executive director. Right, even if we report it, there's a high chance it'll get swept under the rug. Robert then looked apologetically at me and said, Mike, you're going to be handling a new project soon, right? Your partner for that is Christopher. What? I thought someone else was supposed to take that role. Christopher forced his way into it. Compared to other projects, this one is less complicated. He's trying to take it easy while making it look like his own accomplishment. He's aiming for a promotion here at the head office. Be careful not to get treated badly. Hearing his words, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of concern. If Christopher was really as described, this upcoming project would be a nightmare. I was already juggling multiple tasks and working on other assignments with Robert, making me very busy. I need to be careful not to let this affect my other projects. I braced myself, deciding to handle it as best as I could. However, of course, working with me takes priority. Right, you have other tasks. I don't care about that. That day, I met Christopher for the first time. Before starting the project, we needed to have an initial meeting. However, he had nothing but complaints about the schedule I proposed. Listen, even though we're in different departments, I'm in a higher position than you. I am your boss. Orders from your superior are absolute. I tried to stay as calm as possible and firmly refused, explaining why his demands were impossible. But it seemed he couldn't stand being refused. He eventually slammed his fist on the desk and shouted insults at me. I heard you only have a high school diploma. That explains it. People like you understand this. I'm close with the executive director. What I say is as good as his word. I could fire someone like you any time I feel like it. Understood. I'll try to adjust as much as possible. In the end, I gave in and adjusted my schedule within reasonable limits to meet Christopher's unreasonable demands. But maybe that was the wrong move. He continued to make outrageous demands, pushing work onto me that should have been handled by sales, and changing schedules at his convenience. Robert, that guy is really out of control, isn't he? Over lunch in the usual cafeteria, I vented my frustrations to Robert. Feeling worn out, I feel bad asking for your help even when you're already dealing with so much. No, the project with you is important work. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. While appreciating Robert's concern, I sighed quietly, wondering how I was going to get through this. And then, one day, Robert and I were at a client meeting. We had worked with this client before, so I was familiar with our business partner, Nicholas. Now, regarding the next phase. Just as Nicholas was about to continue, my smartphone lit up with an incoming call. Wow, I muttered softly. It was Christopher. I ignored it since we were in the middle of a meeting, but the phone kept ringing repeatedly. Nicholas, I'm sorry. The company has been calling me non-stop. If it's an emergency, it might be a problem. May I take this call? Of course. This is a good time for a break anyway. You can take the call here in this room. Thank you. I appreciate it. I moved to the corner of the room and answered the call. Christopher immediately started yelling at me. Why didn't you pick up the phone immediately? Do high school graduates not know basic business etiquette? His voice was so loud that I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. My apologies. Where are you? Get back here now. We have an online meeting starting, and I'm currently in the middle of another client meeting. Christopher shouted even louder. Didn't I tell you not to go against my orders? It's probably not an important meeting anyway. Join this meeting now. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. I had endured it all this time, but I knew I couldn't take it any longer. Understood. I ended the call and quickly apologized to Robert and Nicholas. Both of them understood the situation immediately, and I hurriedly prepared to return to the office. As Christopher wanted, I joined the online meeting. Apparently, He had reserved an available meeting room just for this. As soon as I arrived, I was met with a barrage of scolding for being late. When the meeting began, Christopher switched to a charming smile as he addressed the client representative. "And that's how it is. We appreciate your cooperation." However, the so-called meeting was nothing more than a show where he flattered the client. It was filled with unrelated small talk, with Christopher showering the other party with praise between conversations. Did he really drag me back to the office just to waste my time like this? I looked at him with cold eyes. He didn't seem to notice. "You can leave now," he said dismissively, waving me off, as if swatting away an insect. Without saying a word, I turned to leave the room as instructed. Just then, "Excuse me," a voice said. Robert entered the room, looking serious. "What is it? Do you need something?" Christopher asked, annoyed. "Yes, I need to speak to both of you," Robert said, turning to face us both before continuing. "Because you forced Mike to leave in the middle of a client meeting. We lost a $10 million contract." "What?" Christopher's voice came out in a stupidly high pitch. Beside him, I sank into a chair, feeling drained. "No way. Following the director's orders cost us the $10 million contract we were handling." At that moment, Robert's smartphone rang. It was Nicholas calling, as if on cue. "It's the client calling. I'll put it on speaker," Robert said. Nicholas's voice came through the speaker, and as soon as he spoke, Christopher's face turned ghostly pale. "Thank you for earlier. I assume the director who forcibly called Mike back is there. I apologize if this was considered an insignificant project. I overheard your phone conversation with Mike. It was loud enough that I could hear it clearly without a speaker. I will be sure to report this matter to your company's higher-ups." With that, Nicholas ended the call. "Why didn't you say anything?" Christopher snapped back to reality and lunged toward me. I sidestepped, and Christopher stumbled and fell pathetically to the floor. Looking down at him, I calmly replied, "Weren't you the one who gave the orders? You said a superior's orders were absolute, didn't you? Even so, leaving a $10 million deal to return to the office. You really are just a high school graduate. Don't you understand the importance of work? Didn't I say you ordered me to do so? Have you already forgotten your own words? You belittle me for my education, but are you really a university graduate? Your memory seems incredibly unreliable." His face turned bright red and trembled at my words. He tried to swing at me again, but it seemed he wasn't very athletic. I dodged him easily for the second time. "Christopher, stop this. Even if you're connected to the senior executives, violence is a crime. Do you really want to get reported to the police?" Robert's calm voice intervened, stopping Christopher. The mention of the police made him hesitate, and though he glared at me, he made no further moves to attack. What Christopher didn't know was that Robert and I were telling one big lie. The $10 million deal wasn't really lost. Rewind to the moment when I first answered Christopher's call. Nicholas and Robert, who had been taking a break, were startled by the loud voice coming through the phone and hurried over to me in the corner of the room. "What's going on?" When Robert realized the caller was Christopher, he explained the situation to Nicholas on my behalf. Nicholas thought for a moment before making an unexpected proposal. "Why don't we put on a little act?" "An act," Robert answered in my place, while I struggled with Christopher on the line. "Yes. Let's pretend this man cost us the contract. We'll say I canceled the deal out of anger due to his order to call Mike back. Some people like him only realize their actions when they face real consequences." Later, I learned that Nicholas had once experienced power harassment from someone similar to Christopher. Seeing me in distress, he felt compelled to intervene. Robert and I agreed to the plan. And now, in front of us, Christopher was visibly shaking. Even if you try to claim it's not your fault, we have the client's testimony. You're the one who will be held accountable for this incident, I said. Christopher, who had just been flushed with rage, now turned pale. It's not my fault. No, it is. By the way, did you even know what kind of project Robert and I were handling? Robert sighed in exasperation. I provided you with proper reports, haven't I? Did you really have no idea what tasks your subordinates were working on? That's negligence. It's your job to keep track of their responsibilities. What exactly have you been doing? I remembered Robert once telling me, Christopher only cares about his own promotion and has no clue what work his team is doing. Today was further proof of that. He didn't know we were working on a high-stakes project and dismissed it as insignificant. Go apologize to the client immediately, Christopher shouted in panic, but we stared at him with disbelieving eyes. Why should we go and apologize? Robert said firmly, and I nodded in agreement. If anyone should go, it's you. Nicholas, the person in charge, is angry at your behavior. If we went to apologize, it would only make him more furious. Christopher struggled to find the right words, panicking as we held him accountable. To deal the final blow to Christopher, I let out an exaggerated sigh and spoke. I'll be reporting this to the president as well. The president knows who I am, so it won't take long for the message to get across. Christopher wasn't the only one shocked. Robert was too. Wait, you know the president? Yes, an old mentor from my alma mater is a friend of the president. That's how I joined this company. In truth, my former teacher, Mr. Brown, had been friends with the president for many years. Our company was sizable enough that a high school graduate wouldn't typically be hired, but Mr. Brown's strong recommendation to the president was what secured my position here. Until now, I hadn't reported Christopher's behavior to the president because I didn't want to burden him with what I saw as minor issues, and I felt confident I could manage. But watching Robert and the other sales staff suffer from Christopher's actions made me realize that I would have had to report it sooner or later. Nicholas's suggestion came at the perfect time. If handled correctly, this could be the means to remove Christopher from his current position. He likely never imagined that I had a connection to the president. His face went from pale to ashen white. I'm sorry. I apologize for everything up until now. I'll go to the client and apologize myself. Just please don't tell the president. In an instant, Christopher's attitude changed, and he bowed deeply to me in apology. Apologizing just because you don't want me to report this to the president? What value does that kind of apology hold? Please, Mike, tell me whatever I need to do to make it up to you. You never called me by my name before, referring to me as the high school graduate or the low-educated one. And now, at this point, you call me by name. It's counterproductive. I find it extremely unpleasant. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, don't go to the president. Looking at his desperate plea with a cold stare, I responded, I won't accept your apology. You need to take responsibility for your actions. No matter what happens from here on out, it's on you. I will neither sympathize nor help you. With my unequivocal rejection, Christopher collapsed in despair. Immediately after, I reported the incident to the president. Nicholas also made a report to our company, which made the process go smoothly. In the end, Christopher was demoted and transferred back to a branch office. Robert later mentioned that he had given a detailed account of the incident to a contact at the branch. So it seemed that him, stripped of his authority, was now being treated coldly there. The president reportedly advised the senior executive, who had recommended Christopher to reconsider his friendships. In the sales department, our current section chief was promoted to department head, and a new position, assistant department head, was created to support him. Robert was appointed to that role. Looks like you're on the fast track for promotion, Robert. You'll have to treat us to dinner. Well, the pay hasn't changed much, but the $10 million deal was progressing smoothly and nearing its conclusion. Once it wrapped up, I planned to invite Nicholas and hold a celebratory gathering. Hey, William. While I was working, I heard an unexpected voice call out to me. What a sad life you've got. The person looking at me with a smug smile was Kevin, my high school classmate. Kevin always looked down on me back then. Memories from high school came flooding back in an instant, and I remembered the promise I made to myself. One day I'd show him. My name is William. I'm 35 and work for a food manufacturer. I've always loved cooking, and now I'm involved in product development. When I got hired in the industry I admired, I was genuinely thrilled. The CEO of our company, Stephen, appreciated my passion and decided to hire me. And he still watches over me with encouragement. Stephen has even started bringing me to meetings with clients, including our frequent trips to one of our major partners. The CEO of that company, Brian, also seems to like me. He's even invited me and Stephen out for drinks on occasion. During one of these outings, Brian confided in us. Around William's age, we have someone at our company too, but he's a nepotism hire and can't do the job. Being an executive's son, I thought he'd have a better work ethic, but if only he had as much enthusiasm as William here. I remember thinking how surprising that was. One day, when I was making a delivery to Brian's company, someone called out to me unexpectedly, "William." I looked up to see a man in a suit. He looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. I thought, was he someone I'd met through work? Before I could puzzle it out, his next words brought everything back. "A delivery? So you're one of our subcontractors. What a sad life you've got." At that moment, my high school memories came rushing back. It was Kevin, my old classmate. Kevin's father was an executive at some company, and he used to boast, "I'm lined up for a nepotism hire, so I don't have to study seriously. I won't end up living a pathetic life like you all." Though I tried to avoid him, I had the misfortune of sitting next to him, and he'd targeted me. My family wasn't especially wealthy, but it was nothing to be ashamed of. Still, Kevin would constantly compare his things to mine, sneering, "Eck, that's so tacky," or, "Another poor-looking lunch today, huh?" At first, I tried to argue back, but eventually, it felt pointless, so I began ignoring him. That only led to more harassment. He started hiding my textbooks and tearing up my assignments. Fortunately, I had good friends who helped me resolve the issue. But meeting Kevin again brought back all those grudges from the past. Because of Kevin throwing out my assignments, I couldn't submit them on time, which affected my grades and cost me a university recommendation. Though I ended up happy at my current job, back then I hated Kevin for making me miss out on college. And I'll never forget how he laughed, saying, "What, can't afford college? Figures, you poor thing." Looking down at me now, unlike you, I'm an elite. I'd never do some low-level job like this. "Come on, hurry up and get back to work, poor guy." Kevin sneered. Did he think delivery work was beneath him? Our company handles the cleaning and blanching of vegetables, which we then deliver to clients for further processing. The deliveries are a crucial part of our business, so what was he even talking about? Kevin just seemed intent on looking down on me. I wanted to retort, but yelling here would cause trouble for everyone around. Somehow, I held my tongue. Long time no see. I didn't think I'd ever find you working here, I said, then returned to my task. Kevin continued with his snide remarks every time he saw me, but eventually, his supervisor appeared and called him over, allowing me to breathe a sigh of relief. I thought back to what Kevin had said in high school. Maybe his father was an executive at this company. As I was about to leave, Brian walked over, and I greeted him. William, we're planning a networking event with your company. I've already informed Stephen, so you should join us. Brian smiled as he said this, and I felt a surge of happiness. Yes, I'm looking forward to it, I replied. Little did I know that this networking event would lead to such a major incident. The following week, when I arrived at Brian's company for a delivery, Kevin was waiting there for me. There you are, he said, as if welcoming an old friend. But I've never thought of Kevin as a friend. Just an ex-classmate, nothing more. I had no interest in small talk with him. In fact, I'd rather not see his face at all. Not that he'd ever realize that, of course. Kevin spoke to me with a casual familiarity. I've got a favor to ask you. I heard there's a networking event coming up with your company, and I got stuck organizing it. I don't get why we're even doing this with a subcontractor company like yours. But orders are orders, so here I am, handling it despite the hassle. Do me a favor and reserve a venue, will you? This Friday. I don't know who's coming, but I was told to arrange for 34 people, so I'm counting on you. What? I asked, surprised, but Kevin ignored me, slipping his business card into my pocket. Just email me once it's arranged. Thanks. And with that, he walked off. I couldn't chase after him, as my hands were full with the delivery. Same old Kevin, dumping his work on others, and then disappearing. Still, if he didn't handle it, the networking event could be jeopardized, which could affect our relationship with the company. Ignoring him wasn't an option. After finishing my delivery, I called one of our chain's beer halls and managed to secure a reservation, despite the short notice. I emailed the details to Kevin, and he responded with a curt "got it." His lack of courtesy irritated me, but getting angry over everything he did was exhausting. On the day of the networking event, there was a mix-up with our product delivery, so I was busy running around from the morning. I informed Stephen that I'd head straight to the venue, as I'd likely be late. I made so many calls throughout the day that my smartphone's battery died without me even noticing. In the evening, I finally arrived at the venue. Kevin and I were supposed to meet there 30 minutes before the event started, but he was nowhere to be seen. Just then, Brian arrived with some executives. I decided to call Kevin, but only then realized my phone was dead. Apologizing to Brian, I went to look for a public phone. I pulled Kevin's business card from my bag and dialed his number. When Kevin answered and I introduced myself, he laughed. A public phone? Don't tell me you're so broke you couldn't afford your smartphone bill. Reluctantly, I explained, I've been out all day and didn't notice my phone was dead. Anyway, why aren't you at the beer hall we reserved? Then Kevin said something outrageous. Why would I go to some shabby place owned by your company's subcontractor? Like I'd ever step foot in that dump. He laughed. What? I couldn't help but raise my voice. Still laughing, Kevin replied, cancel all 34 reservations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What do you mean, cancel? We'll be charged a cancellation fee. And what about the networking event? Panicking, I asked Kevin. Kevin sneered. I booked a different place, a high-end restaurant. It's leagues above some beer hall you'd reserve. Just another way to show the difference between you and me. So why don't you handle the cancellation fee? I quickly realized his intention. Did you plan this from the start to make me look bad? and force me to pay the cancellation fee. Kevin laughed. You're pretty sharp for once. I shot him a smirk full of sarcasm. Kevin, are you really okay with this? He laughed mockingly. Of course. My bosses are already here, and I'm off to enjoy some fine dining. You can stay back and eat all that food for 34 people. I took a deep breath and responded, understood. I'll let your company's president and executives know that you won't be joining us, as they're waiting here. I spoke as if Kevin and I were complete strangers. He paused, surprised. Wait, what? Ignoring him, I hung up the phone. Since it was a public phone, he wouldn't be able to call me back. I hurried back to Brian. Brian, I'm so sorry. I explained everything to him and the executives with him. How I was tasked with making the reservation. How my phone had died. And how I'd just contacted Kevin. It turned out that Stephen, after receiving the venue details from me, had relayed them to Brian and the executives. Apparently, Kevin hadn't expected Brian or the executives to show up. He had sent out an email to the employees about a social gathering at a high-end restaurant, but had somehow failed to inform Brian or the board members. This slip-up perfectly illustrated just how careless Kevin could be in his work. Brian, clearly furious, demanded, "Who arranged this mess?" I handed him Kevin's business card, and one of the executives looked stunned. "No," he whispered, visibly pale. "I can't believe my son caused such trouble." "I'm terribly sorry," said the executive, who, I realized, was Kevin's father. Brian then called Stephen, who informed him that he was already en route to the high-end restaurant after receiving the updated location details. The restaurant was about a 15-minute walk from here. Brian suggested that Stephen invite the rest of the employees and shared the situation. After a while, Stephen arrived with the employees. Kevin's father apologized to everyone, then left the restaurant. Brian seemed to enjoy the beer hall, praising the food, saying it was excellent for the price. As our reserved 2 hours ended and we stepped outside, we found Kevin and his father waiting for us. Kevin shot me a glare when I looked at him. Brian asked the others to head home, leaving just me behind. Kevin's father spoke to him in a stern voice, apologized to William. Kevin mumbled, "I'm sorry," in a barely audible tone, but I wasn't about to let it go at that. I stared at him and said, "If you're not actually sorry, then don't bother apologizing." Kevin looked defiant. As I held his gaze, memories of high school came flooding back. But I enjoy my job now, and I'm glad I joined this company. I'd almost forgotten what happened back then. But meeting you and being looked down on by you again brought it all back. Kevin's father and Brian both frowned. As I continued, "You always said you'd get a job through nepotism because your dad is an executive, and your family would pay for college. My family wasn't rich, and without a scholarship, I planned to work right after high school. I worked hard because I wanted to go to college. But your stupid pranks ruined my chances at a recommendation." Kevin looked confused, so I spelled it out. "Don't remember. You hid and tore up my assignments. Because of your pranks, I missed deadlines, and I lost my scholarship recommendation." Kevin's face lit with a mocking smirk as he remembered. I glared at him. "Aren't you ashamed, humiliating your own father like this? Or does it amuse you? Your father had to bear that shame in front of everyone here because of your petty actions." Kevin's father glared at him, too. I continued, looking directly at Kevin. "You said I was living a pitiful life, but I'm enjoying my work and feeling fulfilled. If you ask me, a nepotism hire who lacks both skill and drive, doing unimportant tasks because he can't be trusted with real responsibilities, that sounds like a far more pitiful life." Kevin's expression darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. Brian started laughing at my words. So you remembered what I said to you before, William? That's right. The executive's son who was hired through nepotism but has no skill or passion for the job. That was Kevin. With a few drinks in him, Brian was more talkative than usual. I actually had high hopes for Kevin, but he didn't turn out anything like his father. Hearing this, it seemed clear that Kevin's father was likely a skilled worker. Otherwise, he wouldn't have risen to an executive position. Kevin's father looked deeply embarrassed, while Kevin's face showed clear shock at Brian's blunt words. I turned to Kevin and asked, "Did you actually think you were good at your job, Kevin?" He looked up at me, stunned. I had hit a nerve. Hearing your own boss state outright that you lack both skill and enthusiasm would be a serious blow for anyone who thought otherwise. Kevin's father sighed heavily. To think my son had been so deluded, causing such trouble for our clients, I'm genuinely ashamed. He continued, I had you transferred to your current department because you were dead weight in the previous one. I thought you might at least contribute where you are now, but here you are, failing to arrange a simple gathering and causing issues with a business partner. You're utterly useless. Kevin's eyes widened at his father's words. It finally made sense to me. The reason I'd been running into him recently was because of that transfer. As Kevin stood there in shock, his father sighed once more. I decided to add to it. You called this beer hall a cheap, shabby place. But what exactly is wrong with it? What's so shabby about it? And, by the way, that high-class restaurant you booked is part of the same chain. Kevin's face grew even more embarrassed. Then his father spoke again. Having a son like you is humiliating. If you don't achieve any results in your current department, you're going to have to leave. At his father's words, Kevin paled. I gave him one last look. You'd better give it your best, I said, then nodded to Brian and Kevin's father, and walked away. 2 months later, I heard that Kevin eventually resigned, unable to achieve any results. Apparently, his father was so angry that he kicked Kevin out of the family home. Kevin had been relying on his parents, spending his salary on luxury items and cars, and now his father demanded he repay the living expenses they had covered. Kevin had to sell everything, from his branded goods to his car. And now he was barely getting by on the small savings he had left. His job search wasn't going well either, and he was complaining that he couldn't even afford a decent place to live. But his father had no intention of helping him. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be Kevin, asking if I could lend him some money. I responded, "You sure have some nerve asking for money from someone you used to look down on. If I were you, I'd be too ashamed to make that kind of request. Either way, I have no intention of lending you a single cent. Kevin would have to manage on his own." Today, Brian invited me out for drinks. He had taken a liking to the beer hall where we held the company gathering, and now he often invites Stephen and me there. Stephen has come to recognize my efforts and recently started entrusting me with larger projects. I'm proud of the work I'm doing, and I'm determined to keep giving it my all.
I'm really disappointed in you, Malia.
What?
When we first met, you were so serious and reserved. It was a thrill trying to win you over. I was taken aback by what my husband, Greg, said. To him, I was nothing more than a challenging conquest. But if that's how he wants to play it, I won't hold back either. I don't want to continue this relationship with him anymore. I'll get the evidence I need and show you I can leave.
He's in critical condition, unconscious.
I don't have time to get caught up in this nonsensical situation. I'm not his wife. I'll make that clear and hit my real husband with divorce papers. My name is Malia. I'm 27 years old. Just your average office worker. I got married about a year ago, so I can't really call myself a newlywed anymore. My husband Greg, who's a year younger than me, works at one of our client companies. We met when we started working together on a joint project. To be frank, I thought he was handsome from the moment we met, but I didn't think much more of it at the time. I hate to toot my own horn, but I'm the type who's married to her job. Maybe that's why people say I give off an unapproachable vibe. I don't get people casually chatting with me outside of work very often. That's just how I am, so I've never had much luck in the romance department. And I figured that wasn't about to change.
Malia, you're so cool. So reliable and all.
During breaks at work, Greg would often flash me a smile and say things like that. At first, I wished he'd focus on his job instead of wasting time talking to me. But as he kept striking up conversations, my icy exterior gradually began to melt. He was so attentive in every way, and each time his kindness touched me, I could feel my heart waver. Before I knew it, I found myself dreading the end of our joint project. Apparently, he felt the same way. Would you maybe want to keep seeing each other? Like, outside of work and stuff. When he said that to me, I was overjoyed, to be honest. And so, we started dating, and ultimately got married after Greg proposed. Our newlywed life was a happy one, with no complaints. I still believe that. My family welcomed him warmly too, and I had no dissatisfaction to speak of. But recently, I started to sense that something was off. On the surface, our life was no different than before. But for some reason, at some point, it seemed like his gaze had lost the passion it once held. It's not that he completely lost interest in me, but it felt like it just wasn't the same as when we first started dating after the joint project ended. I figured that's normal after being married for a year. I tried to convince myself of that. But I just couldn't shake this uneasiness. Take the housework, for example. When we first got married, we'd take turns washing dishes and preparing meals. We also made a point of splitting the laundry and taking out the trash as much as possible to minimize the burden on each other. But lately, the frequency with which Greg did chores had decreased. Sorry, work's been crazy recently. It's true that Greg has been working a lot of overtime lately. I sighed heavily as I pondered her husband's recent behavior. Sure, he's been apologizing, and it's not like he's completely stopped helping out at home. But his busy season at work just ended not too long ago. So how can he still be so swamped? It doesn't add up, she thought, furrowing her brow in frustration. I hadn't been to his office in a while, so I couldn't really know the details of his work. I knew his company had started a new joint venture, but this time someone else was in charge of it. That person, Crystal, was apparently in the same class as Greg in college, but I had rarely spoken to her. As the daughter of a company executive, she seemed to have no interest in getting friendly with those around her. Rumor had it that she had been forcefully inserted into this project to establish a track record. But I couldn't be sure what the real story was. In any case, I and Crystal weren't close, so I had no idea about the current situation. She couldn't tell if his company was actually that busy right now. Maybe I was overthinking it. My own company, which was in a similar line of business, wasn't that hectic at the moment, so perhaps that's why it stood out to her. But there was something else bothering I that kept nagging at my thoughts. It was his body odor. Or rather, his lack thereof, even when he came home after working overtime. Instead of reeking of sweat, he smelled pleasantly fresh, as if he had just showered. His office did have a small shower room installed, so it wasn't that strange. I wanted to believe that, but then something else didn't add up. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna go rinse off this sweat, he would say as soon as he got home, heading straight for the shower. But if he had already showered at work, why would he need to do that? It's not like he took the crowded subway. Greg commuted by car. Moreover, in all the time I had known him, he had never been the type to be that diligent about his personal hygiene. I had certainly never seen him use the office shower room to freshen up. And that's why it just didn't sit right with me.
Do you think that's okay?
Grant, a younger male coworker at I's company, asked her that question in the employee cafeteria. It felt strange for I to now be in a position of mentoring others, when not so long ago she had been the new hire herself. Grant was honestly a bit clumsy, so I had to watch over him quite closely. Today, too, I had been pointing out his various mistakes, and before I knew it, it was already lunchtime. They had agreed to grab a quick bite separately and then get back to work. But noticing I's gloomy expression, Grant had insisted on having lunch together. I hadn't intended to share her personal issues. But pressured by Grant, I had ended up spilling the whole story. Maybe I was just a pushover. Or maybe this situation was weighing on her more heavily than she had realized. I wasn't sure which it was. In any case, as I reluctantly explained her circumstances, Grant seemed perplexed. Unable to gauge the meaning behind his reaction, I questioned him.
Okay with what? Well, you know.
He shifted uncomfortably, as if he didn't want to say it. It seemed to be a sensitive topic, but having come this far, I needed to get to the bottom of it.
Just spit it out.
Rubbing the back of his head, Grant reluctantly shared his thoughts.
Coming home late from work, neglecting housework, being kind of cold lately. Aren't those all common signs of cheating?
I was stunned into silence by his blunt assessment. He was absolutely right. That combination of factors was a textbook cheating scenario, the kind you see in novels and dramas all the time. Sure, once in a while there's a story where it turns out the husband was actually working hard for his family's sake and the couple's relationship is great. But the vast majority of the time, it means he's having an affair. I felt ashamed for not realizing it sooner. Or maybe I just didn't want to think about it, even though deep down I knew.
He is cheating on me.
I'm sorry. It's just speculation on my part.
No, it's okay.
Thank you, I said softly, expressing my gratitude to Grant. If he hadn't pointed it out, I might have turned a blind eye to it forever. As a token of my appreciation, I paid for his lunch and left the cafeteria early. I needed to gather my thoughts before resuming work. In reality, I think there's a pretty good chance Greg is having an affair. The thought stirred up a whirlwind of emotions inside me. Now that I've become aware of it, I can't just leave things as they are. It would be impossible to focus on work or even carry on with my normal life. I'll try talking to him directly about it when I get home. With that decision made, I was finally able to regain some semblance of peace of mind. Somehow, I managed to get through the rest of the workday and headed home when it was time. By the time I arrived at our apartment in the fading light, Greg hadn't returned yet. Time seemed to crawl by agonizingly slowly as I waited, but Greg was nowhere to be seen. I'm home. Another grueling day of overtime. Greg walked through the door after 11 p.m., announcing his arrival. Once again, his body didn't have much of an odor. No, if anything, I thought I detected a pleasant fragrance emanating from him. Feeling unsettled, I took his jacket as he headed for the shower. I'm sorry, I mumbled apologetically as I searched the pockets of his jacket. I desperately hoped I wouldn't find anything. But my wish was tragically betrayed. From the inner pocket of Greg's jacket, I pulled out a single condom. There's no reason for him to have that in his work jacket. It's not like he's in a situation where someone would give him one. If he bought it for our intimate moments, it's strange that there's only one. In that case, it should be an unopened box. Unless there's some other explanation I can't even imagine. I'll have to hear it straight from his mouth. My resolve solidified. I stopped Greg as he was getting ready for bed after his shower.
Oh, what is it, Malia?
His face was completely nonchalant, not at all the expression of a cheating husband. Honestly, I hesitated to even ask. But I couldn't ignore these feelings gnawing at me.
I found this in your jacket pocket. What's the meaning of it?
Driven by those thoughts, I directly confronted him with my doubts. Maybe I didn't need to ask so bluntly. But I wanted to face Greg head-on. I had hoped he would do the same for me. But that hope was swiftly shattered.
So, what do you think it means, Malia?
What? Greg's response wasn't an excuse or an honest answer. It was a twisted, mocking retort.
You think this proves I'm cheating on you? Why else would I be asking you?
And that was the literal truth. Based on the circumstances, it was pretty much confirmed, but I didn't know for certain which it was. That's why I wanted Greg to tell me in his own words, so I could know for sure. But it seemed Greg had no intention of doing that.
Aren't you going to say you trust me or something? I want to trust you. That's why I'm trying to get this straight.
Then just keep on trusting me, plain and simple. I was at a loss for words at his incredibly irresponsible statement.
Are you telling me to overlook your cheating? That's not what I'm saying. Take it however you want. But if you're calling it cheating, show me some clear evidence.
If I had that kind of proof, I wouldn't be asking him about it in the first place. Greg must know that too. He just flashed a smug smile. Faced with his attitude, all I could do was stammer.
That's... If you don't have anything, then don't bother asking.
Greg shrugged at me as I struggled to find my voice.
I gotta say, I'm disappointed in you, Malia.
What?
When we first met, you seemed so guarded that it was a thrill to win you over.
What is he talking about? I couldn't quite grasp what Greg meant. No, I didn't want to understand. I refused to comprehend words that made it sound like he thought of our relationship, our marriage, as some kind of game.
I thought staying married would keep things interesting, but not so much. Well, it's easy for me to handle at least. What are you saying?
Nothing really.
Just that being married to you turned out to be more boring than I expected.
After that dismissive comment, he let out a sleepy yawn. Not the demeanor of a man being interrogated about infidelity. But I was so stunned that my mind was reeling, unable to find my next words. Then, in a perfectly normal tone, he told me,
if you want a divorce, make sure you bring some real evidence. I don't want to waste my time.
With that, he left me standing there and went into his room. Greg slept in his own room on days he worked late, claiming he got too wound up and never knew when he would fall asleep. But I could no longer believe it was just overtime. However, so thoroughly deceived, I could only watch blankly as he walked away. From that day on, our daily life underwent a drastic change. The biggest difference was in his attitude toward me. He stopped doing the bare minimum of housework he used to do. I could no longer sense any of the attentiveness from when we first met. And he was clearly looking at me with a contemptuous gaze. He kept coming home late, insisting it was overtime, with that expression and demeanor. In truth, I must be an idiot. Considering his cheating and treatment of me, I have no reason to handle his share of the chores or prepare his meals. But I couldn't cut him off completely because of our memories together. I kept doing the housework as always and continuing our life together. I clung to the faint hope that someday he would go back to how he was when we first got married. Then one day, it happened.
Who could that be?
Once again, Greg came home late, claiming it was due to overtime. I should have just gone to bed, but I waited up until the doorbell rang at 9 p.m. Greg has a key, so there's no need for him to ring the doorbell. Wondering who it could be, I peered through the peephole and saw a woman standing there. She had a somewhat frumpy overall appearance.
Excuse me, who are you?
I asked through the door. The woman looked a bit startled, then opened her mouth to speak.
Are you Greg's wife?
Yes, I am.
I'm the woman who got involved with your husband, Greg.
I was shocked by her sudden declaration. To openly admit to the affair and show up at our home like this. But something wasn't right. Greg still wasn't home yet today either. I had already confirmed with an acquaintance from when we worked together that Greg's current company wasn't particularly busy, meaning he should be out cheating right now. So it was strange that his affair partner was here. Perplexed, I decided to let her in and hear her out. The woman, Amelia, apparently works at a subcontractor for Greg's company. She said that through their business interactions, Greg treated her kindly and she developed feelings for him, eventually confessing.
Sure, I've never met a girl like you before.
They got physically involved a few times after that, but
I didn't know he was married.
Amelia cast her eyes downward apologetically as we talked in the living room. It seems he never mentioned me before starting the affair. When Amelia found out later, she felt terrible, but contrary to those feelings, she couldn't easily end her attachment to him. Not knowing what to do, aware it was wrong, she looked up our address and came here today. To apologize in front of me, explain the situation, and talk it out. Normally, I should probably be angry at her too. But more than that, I had found a new target for my explosive rage. None other than Greg. Hearing Amelia's story completely severed any lingering attachment I had to him. Greg cheated on me, his wife, and then went after Amelia on top of that. The things Amelia told me, contrasted with what he said to me, I finally understood. Greg approaches women like it's all a game to him. I felt like a fool for trying to engage earnestly with someone like that. I concluded I needed to leave him as soon as possible. And with that, sympathy clearly won out over any other feelings toward her.
Amelia, there's something I need to tell you. What is it?
I proceeded to tell her everything she needed to know.
You absolutely must cut ties with him immediately. For your own good.
That included enlisting her cooperation for my divorce. By the end of our conversation, Amelia too was filled with the same fury I felt. A week passed after that incident.
It should be about time.
Greg claimed overtime again today, but everyone knows that's not true. In that case, now was the perfect opportunity to test that out. I took out my smartphone.
Huh?
Just then, the rarely used landline phone started ringing loudly. I wonder who it could be, I thought as I answered the phone. A tense male voice came through from the other end.
Is this the residence of Greg Weiler? Yes, it is. But who is this?
I asked, furrowing my brow, honestly unable to grasp the situation. The caller identified himself as a hospital staff member, stated the name of the hospital, and then delivered unthinkable news.
Please remain calm as you hear this. About 10 minutes ago, Greg Weiler was brought into our hospital. He's in critical condition, unconscious. What? I understand it's hard to believe. But it's the truth.
The man's voice was so solemn it made me uncomfortable. But honestly, I was skeptical.
I knew it.
The smartphone in my hand displayed the location of the GPS tracker I had secretly placed in Greg's car the other day to gather evidence of his infidelity. It currently showed the car parked at a hotel. I had inadvertently obtained one piece of proof of his cheating, but that also meant the Greg Weiler the hospital staff was talking about wasn't the person I knew. So I clearly informed the caller.
That's not my husband. What? But Dash. I'm terribly sorry, but there must be some mistake. Please contact someone else. With that, I hung up the phone. I did feel bad for that Greg Weiler. All I could do was hope he would be all right. But putting that aside, I had my own issues to deal with. I checked the location on my smartphone again and took a taxi to the hotel where Greg and his affair partner were likely to be. I wanted to catch them in a photo if possible as they exited the hotel. Even if I was too late, I could at least confirm the location. It would save me one step, whether I staked it out myself later or hired a private investigator. My destination turned out to be a slightly run-down hotel in a seedy area. Peeking into the parking lot, I saw his car was indeed there. This alone could serve as evidence, but knowing Greg, he might just feign ignorance with a straight face. I wanted to firmly secure proof if I could. With that in mind, I hid near the hotel entrance for a while, waiting for Greg and his partner to come out, but that's strange. No matter how long I waited, they never emerged. Instead, my smartphone kept ringing incessantly. The number was from the hospital that had called my home. I figured this was probably another misunderstanding, but then it hit me. They likely got my home and cell number from the smartphone of this Greg Weiler who was brought to the hospital. But would my number and home phone be in some other Weiler's smartphone? No, that's not possible. I muttered to myself, refuting my own assumption. Which means the Greg in the hospital was the Greg I knew. But his car was here. And that's precisely why I had been convinced this whole time that the person taken to the hospital was someone else. I had no idea what was going on. Just then, a number other than the hospital appeared on my smartphone screen. It was Denny, Greg's father. I decided I shouldn't ignore this call and answered.
Malia? Where are you right now?
According to Denny, he was calling on behalf of the hospital. It seems the Greg who was taken to the hospital is indeed the one I know. Since I had completely ignored their calls, they must have gone through all the contacts in Greg's smartphone. As a result, they reached out to Denny and the others, and finally got in touch with me. That's what I figured happened. Which means, after some thought, I replied, the place Greg was at before being taken to the hospital. It's a hotel. In other words, something happened to Greg here, and as a result he was rushed to the hospital. His car was left behind because there was no time to ask a tow truck or acquaintance to handle it. So inadvertently, I had obtained the ultimate circumstantial evidence to prove his infidelity. The emergency responders who transported him would have no reason to lie about where they found the patient.
I see.
Denny's voice sounded somewhat strained in response to my answer. He had probably already asked for details about where Greg was transported from and the overall situation. Meaning Denny must be aware by now that Greg was cheating. I felt bad for him, but in a way it sped things along, which was a relief. Ignoring the phone calls turned out to be a good thing in the end. But putting that aside, why did he end up being taken to the hospital in the first place?
For now, Greg is all right. He's regained consciousness, but...
Denny trailed off and was silent for a while. It seemed to be a situation that was difficult to put into words. I told Denny I would contact him later for more details, and then headed to the hospital they had called from. Perhaps because there were limited options for emergency transport, it was quite a distance from the hotel. I'd make sure to bill Greg for the taxi fare later. With that resolve, I arrived at the hospital to find a situation that almost made me want to laugh. Greg was sitting on a bed near the entrance. The smug look that had mocked me so much was nowhere to be seen on his face. He was blushing beet red and staring at the floor, looking extremely uncomfortable. And Denny and my mother-in-law Rachel were glaring at Greg,
barely containing their anger. Their slightly flushed faces were likely due to rage. As I stepped into the room, still confused by the situation, Greg noticed me.
Malia, please mediate between me and Dad and the others.
His first words were about his own convenience, not an apology or remorse. I could only be appalled. I never intended to from the start, but any pity I had left for him in my heart completely vanished in that moment.
Huh? Mediate what? Don't tell me it's about the fact that you were cheating. Well, you see. Just so you know, I already confirmed your car abandoned at the hotel.
At my scathing words, the color drained from Greg's face. Meanwhile, my in-laws' faces grew even redder.
I'll double-check with the hospital staff to be sure, but the fact that you were cheating is now irrefutable.
I wouldn't mention the other evidence I had yet. But even without revealing that, he had no way out now. He seemed to realize that. He slumped his shoulders and shrank into himself. It was as if his overconfident demeanor from just a short while ago had been a lie.
More importantly, first explain what happened.
Greg trembled at my sharp rebuke and slowly began to explain the circumstances. Once again claiming overtime to me, Greg had gone to the hotel with his affair partner. They got a bit hungry, so they ate some sandwiches the woman had brought. Then they washed up and used some lubricant to make the act easier before getting intimate. It was at that very moment. An indescribable, intense sensation apparently assaulted the area where they had applied the lubricant. A strange feeling of heat and cold they had never experienced before washed over them, throwing both into total confusion. But that wasn't the only thing that happened to the two of them. In the midst of their agonized writhing, a sudden urge to defecate struck. Even if they tried to make it to the toilet somehow, the bewildering situation made it nearly impossible to walk. As for what ended up happening, it turned into quite a miserable spectacle. The affair partner barely managed to call an ambulance, but he was foaming at the mouth and lost consciousness. However, this seemed to be due not to the physical anomalies, but rather to him being completely distraught from the terror and panic of the incomprehensible situation, combined with the humiliation of soiling himself. In other words, the enormity of the mental shock caused him to fall into a critical, unconscious state. Furthermore, the hotel staff and paramedics witnessed the two of them in that awful condition. On top of that, the affected area where something had occurred was thoroughly cleansed at the hospital. For Greg, who had always acted so high and mighty, the mortifying embarrassment must have been far greater than we could imagine. Moreover, that situation, which could only be described as disgraceful, was no doubt explained to my in-laws in meticulous detail. The reason for their persistently flushed faces was likely not only anger but also embarrassment. Imagining the humiliation Greg was feeling now, I honestly had to fight the urge to burst out laughing. If my in-laws hadn't been there, I probably would have pointed at him and guffawed. Incidentally, the mysterious sensations and bowel urges had apparently subsided completely by this point. There would likely be no lingering symptoms.
That must have been quite an ordeal.
I somehow managed to suppress the laughter that threatened to erupt. Greg must have noticed, as he hung his head in chagrin. I could imagine that something had been mixed into the lubricant. As for the urge to defecate, perhaps it was simply due to some bad food combination? Since the police hadn't been contacted yet, the details were unknown. However, there was one thing that could be said with certainty.
But I have no sympathy for you. This is punishment for your cheating.
Unable to refute my point, he let out a groan. At the very least, if he hadn't cheated, he never would have ended up in this situation. There was no way around the fact that it was entirely his own fault for suffering unnecessary humiliation.
Malia, I'm truly sorry for my foolish son.
With those words, Denny and Rachel beside him deeply apologized to me. I had no intention of blaming my in-laws. I hurriedly tried to reassure them. Please, stop apologizing. Denny, Rachel. You two did nothing wrong. The one at fault is. No matter how you looked at it, the ones to blame were the people who couldn't understand the obvious fact that they shouldn't cheat. As I thought that and was about to lay into Greg again, it happened. You're the one at fault. From beyond the bed where Greg sat, the curtain dividing the room was pulled back to reveal an unexpected person. Crystal! That's right. There stood my coworker Crystal, dressed in a hospital gown. Considering that we were in the same hospital room, and given the situation, I voiced my speculation. Don't tell me his affair partner is. It's not an affair. I'm Greg's true girlfriend. As Crystal declared this vehemently, her shoulders trembling, my in-laws were stunned speechless and Greg clutched his head. While we were still reeling in shock, Crystal launched into an impassioned speech. According to her own perception, people apparently kept their distance from Crystal because she was the daughter of a company executive. From our perspective, it was clearly Crystal who was keeping her distance from us. In any case, Greg apparently treated her kindly as well, and before long they were passionately in love, or so she claimed. To Crystal, he must have been a knight in shining armor. Whereas to me, my impression of him had become nothing more than that of a fickle, unfaithful man. Greg, you said your diligent wife who earnestly handles both housework and her job is boring. As Crystal spoke with a boastful air, my in-laws wore expressions of utter disbelief. Perhaps somewhere in their hearts, they had wanted to believe there was some reason for Greg's infidelity, that is to say, that I was also part of the problem. But now, realizing the issue lay in their son's way of thinking, they seemed to be at a loss for words. Seeing his parents' increasingly grim expressions directed at him, Greg's face turned even paler. In that regard, I'm exciting indifferent from her. Oh, is that so? Then Crystal, if you marry Greg, you won't do any housework? Of course not. Crystal puffed out her chest with confidence, but fury from an unexpected source pierced through her. Are you an idiot? None other than Greg's mother. Rachel's body shook with rage as she exploded at Crystal. What do you mean, idiot? What's wrong with calling an idiot an idiot? As Crystal tried to lunge at her, Rachel silenced her with an overwhelming intensity. A married couple is meant to support each other through life together. And you. Both you and Greg. It was the first time I had seen Rachel so incensed. Perhaps it was a first for Greg as well. He was visibly trembling, evident even to an onlooker. Denny's face also seemed to be turning slightly pale. You should be ashamed of calling it boring to sincerely devote yourself to your partner. Ashamed. Why do I have to be told that by a stranger like you? Though she should have stopped, Crystal still tried to argue back. Rachel unleashed another blistering rebuke at her. I was truly grateful we were the only ones in the hospital room. Shut your mouth! Seeing Crystal let out another scream-like cry, Rachel heaved a sigh of utter exasperation. If you were to marry Greg, I would become your mother-in-law, you know? Oh! As if the thought had never even occurred to her until now, Crystal bit her lip and hung her head at this point. To argue back without even considering that. At the very least, I will not approve of him marrying her, Greg. No, I have no intention of marrying her. What? What do you mean? Perhaps thinking he could ingratiate himself with Rachel, Greg spoke evasive words. Right at that moment, another person appeared. I'm sure that's the case. That's the kind of person you are. It was Amelia, his other affair partner. Gone was the somewhat timid and gentle aura Amelia had when I first met her. She stared at Greg with a gaze conveying the depths of her hatred and resentment. Apart from me and him, the others seemed to have no acquaintance with her, and could only look on in confusion.
Amelia, why are you here too?
The paramedics mentioned it. Since Malia wasn't answering the phone, they called every possible contact. Her number must have been among them. Either way, I had planned to call her later, so the timing was perfect.
Who the hell are you?
Nice to meet you. I'm Amelia, one of Greg's affair partners. Crystal probably never expected Amelia to honestly introduce herself. Greg's eyes widened in disbelief and he trembled as if about to foam at the mouth again. My in-laws seemed unsure what expression to wear, their faces a complex mix that looked both tearful and enraged. On the other hand, as if her earlier scolding from Rachel had never happened, Crystal lashed out fiercely at Amelia.
What is the meaning of this?
This is what it means. Amelia calmly approached Crystal with an unwavering expression and handed her an envelope stuffed with something. She accepted it with a suspicious look tinged with anger, then took out the contents to examine them. The next moment, Crystal let out a scream just as one would expect.
What the hell is this?
And as if it were something filthy, she slammed the envelope's contents onto the floor. The scattered items were photographs. Printouts of pictures Amelia and Greg had taken during their affair. I had asked Amelia to provide evidence in case Greg tried to feign ignorance about the cheating, but I never imagined she would use it this way. It must show how angry Amelia is at Greg and the others, but considering she originally didn't even know it was an affair, I felt a slight pang in my heart. As I glanced at Amelia with those thoughts, she flashed me alone a small, troubled smile. But it lasted only a moment. Her face quickly reverted to an expression filled with loathing.
Greg, care to explain? That's, well, how do I put it?
Unable to very well give a detailed explanation of his philandering ways, Greg just flashed an evasive grin and stammered. Seeing his pathetic state, disillusionment was written all over Crystal's face as she grimaced. I felt an aching emptiness, wondering what I had ever seen in him. That's his true nature.
You should give up on him too.
After that dispassionate mutter, Amelia dropped another bombshell as if it were nothing. Oh, by the way, how was the lubricant?
I mixed in some animal anti-inflammatory medication, so I think it had quite an effect.
Even I was surprised by this, but the actual victims must have been all the more so. Anti-inflammatory medicine, the kind you apply to sore muscles or inflamed tendons. For animal use, its potency must be far greater than what's used on humans. Well, it's no wonder the two of them took massive damage. Greg and Crystal could only gape in shock.
He said before that guy's bringing this kind of thing shows consideration, but it's really for his own benefit, right?
With that final jab, even the usually cocky Greg couldn't hide his anger.
You! How dare!
He tried to raise his voice, but...
Exactly! That's right! In the end, you only think of yourself, you scumbag!
My shout drowned him out, and with his parents glaring daggers at him in unison, he was utterly crestfallen. And with that, the curtain fell for the time being. 1 week later, Greg and I were divorced. Perhaps out of concern for appearances, or maybe to avoid paying alimony, he resisted until the very end. But he had already been confronted with insurmountable evidence. With the images I had received from Amelia, there was no way he could talk his way out of it. Furthermore, Denny even went so far as to say he would completely cut ties with Greg as his son if he didn't agree to the divorce. As a result of all that, he consented to the divorce. On top of that, he would have to pay me $50,000 in alimony, exceeding the going rate. As for the division of assets, I'm extremely grateful that my in-laws arranged it so I wouldn't lose out. Naturally, I had Crystal pay compensation as well. Given her personality, I thought it might be a drawn-out process, but the payment went through with surprising smoothness. I believe informing Crystal's parents of everything that transpired made a big difference. Or perhaps, as executives, they feared a scandal and wanted to sweep it under the rug quickly. As if to prove that point, after the uproar, Crystal was removed from the joint venture team. Whether her parents indirectly suggested it to him or not, Greg was similarly taken off the project. But in hindsight, that was probably a bad move. With Greg and I divorcing and both of them pulled from the team, people around us began to view us with suspicion. By purposely neither confirming nor denying anything, I let everyone's imaginations run wild and spread rumors. As a result, subjected to even stronger gossip and curious stares, the two of them quit the company as if fleeing. I haven't heard details about what happened to them after that. Apparently, he completely lost his confidence and became a shut-in at his parents' home. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say his life is over now. But honestly, I no longer cared. As for Amelia, she turned herself in to the police to atone for the crime of mixing anti-inflammatory medication into the lubricant. Incidentally, she knew there was lubricant in Greg's bag, and Greg was full of openings, so the tampering wasn't that difficult. And the reason the two of them got stomach aches was simply because the sandwiches Crystal made were rotten. It can only be called their own responsibility for heading off to cheat after work. People should properly take responsibility for their actions. That probably applied not only to the tampering, but to the infidelity as well. Precisely because she's an earnest, good person, I felt renewed anger towards Greg. I want to go give him a piece of my mind. However, with my in-laws keeping a watchful eye and no police report filed, I'm not sure what charges Amelia will face. As for me, I'm currently enjoying my freedom in both mind and body. With the alimony, I have plenty of money to live luxuriously. Plus, to fill the void left by those two, it's been decided that I'll be selected for the joint venture again. When that happens, I plan to bring along my younger colleague to learn from the experience. After all, he helped me out a lot with this whole ordeal, so I want to repay that kindness. Sometimes, the way she looks at me is... No, I must be imagining things. In any case, I don't want to deal with romance for a while. Still, life is long. If the mood strikes me someday, it wouldn't be so bad to fall for someone again. When that time comes, I'll be sure to watch out for fools who only say what I want to hear.
Hey! Where the hell have you been?
James shouted at Emily, his voice filled with impatience and annoyance.
I went to buy the things you asked for, remember?
Emily replied, trying to keep her tone even and calm despite the growing tension in the room.
Well then, hurry up and hand them over,
James demanded, his hand outstretched expectantly. Emily couldn't understand why she had to be spoken to like this. This wasn't how someone should behave when asking for a favor.
Seriously, when did it come to this?
Emily muttered under her breath, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. She could easily pinpoint the moment when her husband James's attitude had drastically changed. It was after he had been in a car accident that left him unable to walk. Despite Emily's insistence, James had stubbornly refused to stay in the hospital, insisting on returning home. And thanks to that, Emily had been juggling both work and household chores, essentially doing the work of two people.
Whatever. I'm thirsty. Bring me some coffee,
James ordered, his tone dismissive and entitled. As a small act of defiance, Emily brought James a coffee that was hotter than usual. After taking a sip, James must have found it too hot because he dropped the cup, spilling its contents.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
James accused, his eyes narrowing with suspicion.
Of course not. It's the same as always.
Emily defended herself, feeling a spike of indignation at the baseless accusation.
Like hell it isn't,
James retorted, his voice rising with anger. Then, in a sudden fit of rage, James threw the cup at Emily. Although it didn't hit her face, it struck the back of her hand, causing her to wince in pain.
You've got to be kidding me,
Emily said through gritted teeth, cradling her injured hand. Who's kidding who? James shot back, his expression a mix of anger and bitterness. The senseless argument continued for a while until the doorbell rang, bringing it to an abrupt end.
Go answer it,
James commanded, his tone leaving no room for discussion.
I know, I don't need you to tell me,
Emily snapped back, turning on her heel to leave the room. When she opened the door, there stood a person claiming to be a lawyer.
You're a lawyer? But why?
Emily asked, confusion evident in her voice.
I received a consultation request from James. May I come in?
The lawyer explained, his tone professional and courteous.
Oh, sure. I'll show you to James's room,
Emily replied, still trying to process the unexpected visitor. As Emily led the lawyer to James's room, she couldn't help but wonder what on earth was going on. The lawyer's presence seemed to instantly change James's demeanor from irritable to cheerful.
Finally,
James exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face.
Finally?
Emily echoed, her brows furrowing in confusion.
Well, you'll find out soon enough,
James replied cryptically, leaving Emily to wonder what on earth was about to unfold.
So, lawyer, this woman has been cheating on me, right?
James accused, pointing a finger at Emily.
What are you talking about?
Emily exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief.
I know all about it. You've been meeting up with another man behind my back, haven't you, Emily?
James pressed, his tone dripping with self-righteous indignation.
Huh? That's impossible. What are you saying?
Emily countered, her mind reeling from the baseless accusation.
Anyway, lawyer, this means we can get a lot of compensation from Emily, right?
James asked eagerly, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. At this, the lawyer James had called for adopted a stern expression.
I'm sorry to say, but there is no evidence to support such a claim,
the lawyer stated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument.
What? That can't be right. I mean,
James sputtered, his confidence faltering.
You what? Are you going to say you saw it with your own eyes?
Emily challenged, her anger rising to match James's earlier accusation.
Well, yes. I saw it with my own eyes,
James insisted, though his voice lacked conviction.
But that doesn't make sense, does it? You can't even go outside, right?
Emily pointed out, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. James's words were becoming more and more irrational by the second.
Or maybe someone's been taking you out. But the only person who comes to the house is the home health aide,
Emily added, her tone dripping with sarcasm.
In any case, there is no evidence to suggest that your wife has been unfaithful, so my work here is done,
the lawyer concluded, standing up to leave.
You've got to be kidding me. Some lawyer you are,
James spat, his face twisting with anger and frustration.
I assure you, I am a lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me,
the lawyer replied coolly, exiting the room without a backwards glance.
I'm so sorry for making you come all this way for nothing,
Emily apologized to the lawyer, feeling mortified by James's wild accusations. It was beyond embarrassing to have a lawyer come to their home based on James's delusions, only to find that there was no basis for his claims. "If there's anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me," the lawyer said, handing Emily his business card before taking his leave.
"I understand. Thank you,"
Emily replied gratefully, accepting the card with a nod. With a deep sigh, Emily turned and headed back to the room. She found James looking dejected, all his earlier bravado gone.
"I hate to kick you when you're down, but I think you owe me a detailed explanation,"
Emily said firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. Faced with Emily's determination, James seemed to have no fight left in him. From that moment on, James became as docile as a different person. According to James, he had apparently believed the story told to him by the male home health aide who had been coming to their house. To make matters worse, that man had quit his job a few days ago, leaving no way for Emily to get more details about the story. And now, a new home health aide, a rookie, was coming to their house. Several months passed.
"I'm always causing you trouble,"
James said one day, his tone apologetic. On weekdays, a home health aide came to help, but on weekends, it was basically Emily who took care of James.
"It can't be helped, can it?"
Emily replied, trying to keep the weariness out of her voice. It was while Emily was changing James's adult diapers, as she always did. A message from their daughter, Lisa, arrived on Emily's mobile phone.
"What?"
Emily muttered, her brows furrowing in confusion.
"What's wrong?"
James asked, picking up on Emily's change in demeanor.
"No, it's nothing,"
Emily replied quickly, not wanting to discuss it with James. But as Emily glanced over at James, she was met with an even more shocking sight.
"You,"
Emily breathed, her eyes widening in disbelief.
"What's wrong?"
James asked again, oblivious to the reason for Emily's reaction.
"Haven't you noticed?"
Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
"What are you talking about?"
James demanded, his tone growing impatient.
"No, it's nothing. I'm just going to go out and do some shopping,"
Emily said quickly, forcing a smile.
"Oh, okay. Be careful,"
James replied, a hint of concern in his voice. As soon as Emily left the house, she immediately called Lisa.
"That was..."
Emily began, her voice trailing off as she struggled to find the words.
"Did you see it? I took that photo the other day. I was so surprised, I just had to take a picture. That's definitely Dad, right?"
Lisa asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and urgency.
"Yeah, it is,"
Emily confirmed, her heart sinking at the realization.
"But that's not all. I've been doing some digging, and..."
Lisa continued, her voice growing more serious with each word. Hearing this, Emily couldn't sit still any longer and immediately headed to the nearest police station. "This was too big for me to handle on my own. The situation had escalated beyond my control."
"I'm going to the police station right now,"
Emily declared, her voice filled with determination.
"Then I'll go too,"
Lisa offered, her tone equally resolute.
"Are you sure?"
Emily asked, touched by her daughter's support.
"I think things will go more smoothly if I'm there. So, I'll see you at the police station,"
Lisa replied, her words filling Emily with a sense of strength and unity. Emily was incredibly grateful for Lisa's cooperation. What was about to begin wasn't just a simple act of revenge. It was a furious retribution. It went without saying what would happen to James now. "I'm Emily, 52 years old, and I recently divorced James, who was the same age as me. The reason for the divorce was James, but even now, looking back, I truly believe he was the worst man imaginable.
He was a good person when he was younger, though. I mused, my thoughts drifting back to the early days of our relationship. James and I had joined the same company at the same time and were colleagues. We were both in sales and had a rivalry that pushed us to be better. We were always competing for the top sales performance.
Damn it! I lost again this time. I was pretty confident, too,
James would say, his frustration evident in his voice.
Well, I could say the same,
I would reply, equally disappointed but determined to do better next time.
Can't you let me have first place once in a while?
James would ask, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth.
I wonder if you'd even be happy if I let you have it.
I would muse, my tone teasing. At this, James would adopt a thoughtful expression.
Maybe I wouldn't be happy? My pride probably wouldn't allow it anyway,
he would admit, his competitive nature shining through.
That's what I thought you'd say,
I would reply, a grin spreading across my face. Seeing our interactions, our colleagues would always gossip about when we were going to start dating. But we were the epitome of taking things at our own pace. Work always came first, and we didn't have much interest in being boyfriend and girlfriend. A change came for us when I was 28 years old. It was when I went back to my hometown for the first time in a while.
Emily, you're already 27, right? How are things going?
My dad asked, his tone a mix of concern and curiosity.
How are things going?
I echoed, not quite understanding what he meant.
Marriage. I'm talking about marriage,
he clarified, his expression growing more serious.
Well, how am I supposed to get married when I don't even have a partner?
I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the growing tension. Hearing this, Dad just sighed and went back to his room.
I'm sorry, but try to understand Dad's feelings too. You don't have any siblings, Emily, so he's probably just worried,
Mom said gently, her eyes filled with understanding.
Yeah,
I replied, suddenly feeling a bit guilty for my dismissive attitude.
But you know, I'm not telling you to get married right away. You clearly love your job, so there's no need to rush,
Mom added, her words providing a measure of comfort. Even though Mom said that, the conversation lingered in my mind long after I returned home. If I thought about a future where I never got married and lived alone forever, it scared me a little. The only thing waiting for me down that path was a lonely death. That was something I absolutely wanted to avoid. And then, one day during lunch break.
Actually, I went back to my hometown the other day. They asked me when I'm getting married.
But when I said I had no plans, they gave me a blatantly disgusted look. James confided, his tone a mix of frustration and resignation.
I was told the same thing recently. The nuance was different, but it was pretty much the same thing,
I replied, commiserating with his experience.
Seriously?
James asked, his eyes widening in surprise. Seriously, I confirmed, a wry smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. We laughed together, then looked at each other.
Why don't we try dating? We're pretty similar, so I think we'd get along well,
James suggested, his tone a mix of nervousness and excitement.
I was actually thinking the same thing,
I admitted, feeling a flutter of anticipation in my chest.
I can't imagine getting married right away, so let's start with a trial period. If it doesn't work out, we can just go back to how we were before,
James proposed, his pragmatic approach putting me at ease.
That makes sense,
I agreed, feeling a sense of relief at the thought of taking things slow. And so, we decided to start dating with a trial period. For now, we settled on a period of 3 months. Even so, it was ultimately a temporary relationship,
so we agreed that it was okay to prioritize our own circumstances. The 3-month period seemed long, yet short. Our tendency to prioritize work above all else was likely a contributing factor. "Hey, why don't we try extending the period a bit longer?" James suggested, his tone casual yet hopeful.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I agreed, feeling a sense of relief at not having to make a decision just yet. In this manner, a full year passed by before we knew it.
Can I talk to you for a sec?"
James asked, his expression serious.
"Sure. But I think I already know what you're going to say,"
I replied, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of my mouth.
"You do?"
James asked, his eyes widening in surprise. In the end, we officially started dating.
In hindsight, what was the point of that trial period?
I mused, shaking my head at the memory. If we had just done this from the beginning, everything would have been resolved without all the roundabout nonsense. Hating half measures, we gave our all to both work and our private lives. After we had started dating officially and when I turned 30.
"You seem awfully happy about something,"
James noted, his tone a mix of curiosity and amusement.
"Well, you could say that,"
I replied, unable to keep the grin off my face.
"So?
What happened?" James pressed, his interest piqued.
"I got a promotion,"
I announced, my voice brimming with pride.
"What?"
James asked, his jaw dropping in surprise.
"So, I'm getting promoted,"
I repeated, savoring the moment.
"That's amazing,"
James stammered, clearly taken aback by the news. Given James's prideful nature, I had expected him to react with displeasure, but that wasn't the case at all. Our relationship was going smoothly, and before we knew it, we were about to turn 31. On a certain holiday morning, James said,
"Marry me."
He took a small box out of his pocket as he spoke.
"When did you get that?"
I exclaimed, my eyes widening in surprise.
"Well, I found the right moment,"
James replied, a mischievous grin spreading across his face.
"Can I open it?"
I asked, my heart racing with anticipation.
"Of course,"
James said, his tone gentle and encouraging. When I opened the box, there was a ring adorned with a beautiful diamond.
"Thank you,"
I exclaimed, throwing my arms around James in a tight embrace. Having accepted the proposal, I immediately went to greet my parents. The greetings with my future parents-in-law also went smoothly, and our married life was about to begin. However, a problem arose at this point. Somehow, James had quit his job.
"Why?"
I asked, my brows furrowing in confusion.
"I'm sorry, but there's something I really want to do,"
James explained, his tone apologetic yet determined.
"Something you want to do?"
I echoed, not quite understanding.
"I've always admired engineers,"
James admitted, his eyes shining with excitement.
"But I've never heard you mention that before,"
I pointed out, feeling a bit blindsided by this sudden revelation.
"Well, I never told anyone. I've saved up a decent amount of money, so it'll work out somehow." "Oh, and keep this a secret, okay?"
James requested, his tone conspiratorial. And so, our newlywed life, fraught with challenges, began. Quitting the company seemed to be a sudden decision, and apparently, James had told his boss that it was to take care of his parents. I was also asked various questions, but for now, I had no choice but to go along with what James had said.
"It's not like I can tell them the truth,"
I muttered, feeling a twinge of guilt at the deception. From then on, James shut himself in his room, sitting in front of the computer for hours every day. I knew he was originally a diligent person, but I was worried if he could really catch up by starting to study now. However, something happened that made even that concern fade away. I found out I was pregnant.
Seriously? That's great.
James exclaimed, his face breaking into a wide grin.
Yeah. I have a favor to ask, though. I think there will be more things I'll need your help with from now on,
I said, my tone serious.
Don't worry. I can at least do household chores,
James assured me, his voice filled with confidence. After that, my belly continued to grow steadily. However, James, who had been supportive in the early stages of my pregnancy, seemed to have grown tired of it and started doing nothing more often.
Hey, I'm not feeling well today, so could you prepare your own meals?
I asked, my voice strained with fatigue.
What? Why?
James asked, his tone a mix of confusion and annoyance.
Why? Because my body hurts,
I explained, trying to keep my patience.
You say that, but you can move around just fine,
James retorted, his brows furrowing in disbelief.
It really does hurt,
I insisted, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me.
Fine. I'll go eat out today,
James said, his tone exasperated as he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Was it really something to get so angry about? In the end, I waited for the time of delivery while taking care of most of my personal matters myself. A few weeks later, I gave birth to Lisa. I was relieved that she was born safely. My parents came to the hospital, but James didn't come, saying he was busy.
Where's James?
My mom asked, her brows furrowing in concern.
He seems to be a bit busy,
I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the growing unease in the pit of my stomach.
But today is Sunday. Does he work on holidays too?
My dad pressed, his expression skeptical. I hadn't expected to be questioned like this, so I lost my composure. Dad didn't miss that.
Call James right now,
he demanded, his tone leaving no room for argument.
What?
I asked, caught off guard by his sudden request.
Just do it,
Dad insisted, his expression stern.
This has turned into a hassle,
I muttered, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. In this situation, there was no room to refuse.
Fine,
I relented, reaching for my phone. I called James, but he didn't answer.
It seems like he's not picking up. Maybe he really is busy,
I suggested, hoping to placate my father.
Keep calling until he answers,
Dad ordered, his tone unwavering. I had forgotten that Dad was a stubborn man, recognized by both himself and others. After about 5 calls, James finally picked up.
What's up? I'm a bit busy over here,
James said, his tone slightly annoyed.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that the baby was born safely,
I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Then Dad told me to put the phone on speaker.
Oh, good job,
James said, his tone more casual than congratulatory.
Thanks,
I replied, feeling a mix of relief and unease. At that moment, all I could do was pray that James wouldn't say anything unnecessary.
So, when are you getting discharged? I'm alone here, and the housework is piling up. I need you to do it,
James continued, his tone almost demanding. I thought it was over. Looking at Dad, I saw an expression filled with anger.
Anyway, I think I can be discharged soon. So, talk to you later,
I said hurriedly, trying to end the conversation before things escalated further. After that, I was desperately trying to calm Dad down. He was ranting, demanding that I
call James here,
and criticizing him. Mom managed to handle the situation somehow, realizing that this would cause trouble for the hospital, but from then on, the joy of giving birth had completely vanished. This incident marked the beginning of the deterioration of my relationship with Dad. In the end, after visiting my parents' home when Lisa was in preschool, I never went back. As for James, he managed to find a job 6 months after I gave birth to Lisa. "I'm glad you found a job," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "Well, I studied hard, even sacrificing sleep," James replied, a hint of pride in his voice. I think James was somewhat energetic until Lisa entered elementary school. However, that too came to an end due to James's selfish behavior.
No way! Again!
I exclaimed, feeling a wave of disbelief and frustration wash over me. Well, the work itself was enjoyable. But, I just didn't fit in with the company, or rather, I realized it too late. James explained, his tone almost nonchalant.
"You're just realizing that now?"
I asked, my voice rising with anger. "Don't get so angry," James said, his tone defensive.
"Of course I'm going to get angry,"
I retorted, feeling my patience wearing thin. James had become unemployed again. I wanted to talk to someone about this, but since I had become estranged from my parents, I couldn't rely on them. But even so, I had allies. It was my parents-in-law. They were very warm, had excellent personalities, and were truly admirable people. I couldn't help but wonder how someone like James could have been raised by such wonderful people. However, even that life quickly came to an end. It happened suddenly. It was when Lisa was in 9th grade. Around this time, James had given up on working for a company and was working as a freelancer on a small scale. "My parents died," James said, his voice devoid of emotion.
"What? Stop joking around like that,"
I replied, not wanting to believe what I had just heard. "Why would I need to lie about something like that?" James asked, his tone growing defensive.
"How could this happen?"
I muttered, feeling a sense of shock and disbelief wash over me. "You knew they were on a trip, right? Apparently, they got caught up in an accident," James explained, his voice strained with grief. The thought of never being able to see them again hit me all at once, bringing a wave of sadness and a sense of loss. Even James seemed at a loss for words at that moment. This significant event led James to start going out drinking almost every night. He didn't seem to be working, and his daily rhythm became irregular. "Is work going okay lately?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of concern. "I don't need you to worry about me," James replied, his tone dismissive.
"You shouldn't talk like that,"
I said, feeling a spike of frustration at his attitude. "Can't you just be quiet for a bit?" James snapped, his voice filled with irritation. The conversations between us as a couple also noticeably decreased. If I tried to talk to him, he would make a displeased face. Lisa also started to avoid talking to James when he was like that. That didn't change even as she progressed through high school and university. And then, when Lisa became a senior, Lisa started living on her own when she entered university, so it was just James and me at home. There was hardly any conversation, whether we were eating or in the living room. We had completely grown cold. Then, one day, "I'm going out for a meeting today. I think I'll be back in the evening," James said, his tone businesslike and detached. After saying that, James left. Since it was Saturday, I was taking care of household chores that I couldn't do on weekdays when I received a phone call. They said James had been hit by a car on his way back from the meeting. I contacted Lisa, and we both headed to the hospital. "Oh, you came," James said, his tone casual despite the situation. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. "It seems like both my legs are broken,"
but I'll manage somehow," James replied, trying to sound reassuring. "I see. That's good," I said, feeling a sense of relief that James was all right. However, this was just the beginning. James was hospitalized for about 2 months and was discharged after recovering enough to walk. But a week later, he felt pain in his legs and went to the hospital. This time, due to the excessive pain, he went to a nearby hospital he had visited once before.
"This isn't good,"
the doctor said, his tone grave.
"What?"
I asked, feeling a sense of dread wash over me.
"It seems like the condition of his legs is not good,"
the doctor explained, his expression somber.
"So what's going to happen?"
I asked, my voice trembling with fear.
"Depending on the case, there's a possibility he may become unable to move,"
the doctor replied, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut.
"No way!"
I exclaimed, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. I was worried sick, but I also felt a sense of doubt. James was strangely calm.
"For now, let's wait and see,"
the doctor suggested, his tone meant to be reassuring. "Okay," I replied, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over me. On the way home, James couldn't walk without support.
"Are you okay?"
I asked, my brows furrowing with concern.
"No, it's really painful,"
James admitted, his face contorted with pain.
"Let's get home quickly,"
I said, trying to hurry our pace. Within a month, just as the doctor had said, James became unable to walk.
"For now, let's call an ambulance,"
I suggested, reaching for my phone. But James said,
"I want to go by taxi." "An ambulance would be more reliable,"
I argued, feeling a spike of frustration at his stubbornness.
"No, I just can't walk, that's all,"
James insisted, his tone dismissive. Following James's words, I called a taxi, and we headed to the previous hospital.
"So, what's the situation?"
I asked, my heart pounding with anxiety.
The condition is quite bad,"
the doctor replied, his tone grave.
"So, he won't be able to walk anymore?"
I asked, feeling a sense of dread wash over me.
"That's right,"
the doctor confirmed, his words like a heavy weight on my chest. Looking back now, maybe I should have been more suspicious. In the end, James was diagnosed with paraplegia and became unable to move without a wheelchair. Hospitalization was suggested, but he wanted to recuperate at home. However, since James would be alone on weekdays, we decided to request a home health aide. One was a man in his 30s, and the other was a young woman in her early 20s who was still in training. One day, while living like this,
"Hey! Where the hell have you been?"
James shouted, his tone accusatory and angry.
"I went to buy the things you asked for, didn't I?"
I replied, trying to keep my tone even despite the growing tension.
"Then hurry up and hand them over,"
James demanded, his hand outstretched expectantly. Why did I have to be spoken to like this? This wasn't the attitude of someone asking for a favor.
"Seriously, when did it come to this?"
I muttered, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. It was because he had been in a car accident and lost the ability to walk. James, who hated being hospitalized, selfishly said,
"I want to go home."
Thanks to that, I had been doing the work of 2 people, both my job and household chores.
"Whatever. I'm thirsty. Bring me some coffee,"
James ordered, his tone dismissive and entitled. As a small act of resistance, I brought James coffee that was hotter than usual. After taking a sip, James must have found it too hot because he dropped the cup.
"You did that on purpose, didn't you?"
James accused, his eyes narrowing with suspicion.
"Of course not. It's the same as always," I defended myself, feeling a spike of indignation at the baseless accusation.
Like hell it isn't,
James retorted, his voice rising with anger. Then, James threw the cup at me. It didn't hit my face, but it struck the back of my hand, causing me to wince in pain. "You've got to be kidding me," I said through gritted teeth, cradling my injured hand. "Who's kidding who?" James shot back, his expression a mix of anger and bitterness. The unreasonable argument continued for a while, but it came to an end when the doorbell rang.
"Go answer it,"
James commanded, his tone leaving no room for discussion.
"I know, I don't need you to tell me,"
I snapped back, turning on my heel to leave the room. Then, the person who appeared claimed to be a lawyer.
"You're a lawyer? But why?"
I asked, confusion evident in my voice.
"I received a consultation request from James."
"May I come in?" The lawyer explained, his tone professional and courteous.
"Oh, sure. I'll show you to James's room,"
I replied, still trying to process the unexpected visitor. I led the lawyer to James's room, but I had no idea why this was happening. Upon seeing the lawyer, James, who had been irritated until just a moment ago, broke into a smile.
"Finally!"
James exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face.
"Finally?"
I echoed, my brows furrowing in confusion.
"Well, you'll find out soon enough,"
James replied cryptically, leaving me to wonder what on earth was about to unfold.
"So, lawyer, Emily has been cheating on me, right?"
James accused, pointing a finger at me.
"What are you talking about?"
I exclaimed, my eyes wide with shock and disbelief.
"I know all about it. You've been meeting up with another man behind my back, haven't you, Emily?"
James pressed, his tone dripping with self-righteous indignation.
"Huh? That's impossible. What are you saying?"
I countered, my mind reeling from the baseless accusation.
"Anyway, lawyer, this means we can get a lot of compensation from Emily, right?"
James asked eagerly, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. At this, the lawyer James had called for adopted a stern expression.
"I'm sorry to say, but there is no evidence to support such a claim,"
the lawyer stated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument.
"What? That can't be right. I mean,
James sputtered, his confidence faltering.
You what? Are you going to say you saw it with your own eyes?"
I challenged, my anger rising to match James's earlier accusation.
Well, yes. I saw it with my own eyes,"
James insisted, though his voice lacked conviction.
"But that doesn't make sense, does it? You can't even go outside, right?"
I pointed out, my eyes narrowing suspiciously. James's words were becoming more and more irrational by the second.
"Or maybe someone's been taking you out. But the only person who comes to the house is the home health aide,"
I added, my tone dripping with sarcasm.
"In any case, there is no evidence to suggest that your wife has been unfaithful, so my work here is done,"
the lawyer concluded, standing up to leave.
"You've got to be kidding me. Some lawyer you are."
James spat, his face twisting with anger and frustration.
"I assure you, I am a lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me,"
the lawyer replied coolly, exiting the room without a backwards glance.
"I'm so sorry for making you come all this way for nothing."
I apologized to the lawyer, feeling mortified by James's wild accusations. It was beyond embarrassing to have a lawyer come to our home based on James's delusions, only to find that there was no basis for his claims.
"If there's anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me,"
the lawyer said, handing me his business card before taking his leave.
"I understand. Thank you."
I replied gratefully, accepting the card with a nod. With a deep sigh, I turned and headed back to the room. I found James looking dejected, all his earlier bravado gone.
I hate to kick you when you're down, but I think you owe me a detailed explanation,
I said firmly, crossing my arms over my chest. Faced with my determination, James seemed to have no fight left in him. From that moment on, James became as docile as a different person. According to James, he had apparently believed the story told to him by the male home health aide who had been coming to our house. To make matters worse, that man had quit his job a few days ago, leaving no way for me to get more details about the story. And now, a new home health aide, a rookie, was coming to our house. Several months passed. "I'm always causing you trouble," James said one day, his tone apologetic. On weekdays, a home health aide came to help, but on weekends, it was basically me who took care of James. "It can't be helped, can it?" I replied, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. It was while I was changing James's adult diapers, as I always did. A message from our daughter, Lisa, arrived on my mobile phone.
"What?"
I muttered, my brows furrowing in confusion.
"What's wrong?"
James asked, picking up on my change in demeanor. "No, it's nothing," I replied quickly, not wanting to discuss it with James. But as I glanced over at James, I was met with an even more shocking sight. "You," I breathed, my eyes widening in disbelief.
"What's wrong?"
James asked again, oblivious to the reason for my reaction. "Haven't you noticed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
"What are you talking about?"
James demanded, his tone growing impatient. "No, it's nothing. I'm just going to go out and do some shopping," I said quickly, forcing a smile.
"Oh, okay. Be careful,"
James replied, a hint of concern in his voice. As soon as I left the house, I immediately called Lisa.
"That was..."
I began, my voice trailing off as I struggled to find the words.
"Did you see it? I took that photo the other day. I was so surprised, I just had to take a picture. That's definitely Dad, right?"
Lisa asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and urgency.
"Yeah, it is,"
I confirmed, my heart sinking at the realization.
"But that's not all. I've been doing some digging, and..."
Lisa continued, her voice growing more serious with each word. Hearing this, I couldn't sit still any longer and immediately headed to the nearest police station. This was too big for me to handle on my own. The situation had escalated beyond my control.
"I'm going to the police station right now,"
I declared, my voice filled with determination.
"Then I'll go too,"
Lisa offered, her tone equally resolute.
"Are you sure?"
I asked, touched by my daughter's support.
"I think things will go more smoothly if I'm there. So, I'll see you at the police station,"
Lisa replied, her words filling me with a sense of strength and unity. I was incredibly grateful for Lisa's cooperation. What was about to begin wasn't just a simple act of revenge. It was a furious retribution. When I arrived at the police station, I told them that James had been lying about not being able to walk. I reported that he had been fraudulently receiving medical expenses from the insurance company. How did I realize this? First, it was the photo Lisa had sent me. In it, there was James, walking boldly with the young female home health aide.
"I see. He's definitely walking normally in this,"
the police officer noted, his brows raised in surprise. While this photo alone was decisive evidence, I had also noticed James's toes moving when they shouldn't have, as I was changing his adult diapers. Why hadn't I noticed it sooner?
"But we can't just arrest him right away, can we?"
I asked, feeling a mix of frustration and uncertainty. "You're right." The officer agreed, nodding his head in understanding. "We'll make a decision after conducting a thorough investigation on our end," he explained, his tone professional and reassuring. "I understand. In that case, I'll also consult with a lawyer," I replied, already forming a plan in my mind. "If you're going to take action quickly, that might be a good idea," the officer advised, his words filling me with a sense of determination. Lisa and I left the police station. "But do you have a lawyer in mind?" Lisa asked, her brows furrowing with concern. "Don't worry about that," I replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I took out a business card from my wallet. Then I immediately made an appointment. It was to return the favor to James for what he had done to me before. We went straight to the law office and explained the situation. They said they would take action right away. "Leave it to us. We will definitely meet your expectations," the lawyer assured me, his tone confident and resolute. "Thank you very much," I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. After parting ways with Lisa for the time being, I returned home. "You're late," James shouted, his tone accusatory and angry. "The supermarket was a bit crowded," I explained, trying to keep my voice even despite the growing tension. "Hurry up and prepare the food," James demanded, his entitlement as strong as ever. I no longer felt irritated like I used to. Now, I just wanted to show James hell as soon as possible. I kept in frequent contact with the lawyer, and all the preparations were made. The operation was set to be carried out the following Monday. I took paid leave to prepare for it. Then, in the afternoon, I met up with the lawyer in front of the entrance. "Shall we go then?" the lawyer asked, his tone businesslike and determined. "Yes," I replied, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through my veins. We opened the front door and headed towards James's room. "Why are you here? And who's that guy next to you?" James demanded, his eyes widening with surprise and suspicion. "Long time no see," the lawyer greeted, his tone cool and professional. "I've brought him here today to expose your true nature," I explained, my voice filled with a mix of anger and triumph. "True nature?" James echoed, his brows furrowing in confusion. First, I threw the photo Lisa had taken at James. "It's laughable that you can't walk after seeing this. Everything has been exposed," I declared, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sorry to say, but we've investigated everything, including that person over there. First, her name is Susan, and she's 24 years old," the lawyer revealed, his words hitting James like a punch to the gut. At this, Susan, James's mistress, tried to stop him. "I'll tell you everything," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "Good decision," I replied, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over me. It seems that the two of them first got involved when James had the accident. It was supposed to be a traffic accident, but the other party was this Susan. At first, she apparently planned to threaten James and steal money from him, but somewhere along the way, she became attracted to him. That's when she introduced him to that hospital. Its true identity was a dangerous hospital that would write any diagnosis as long as you paid them money. "I see. I didn't know that much, but this is quite substantial evidence," the lawyer noted, his expression serious and thoughtful. Later on, that hospital would develop into a case big enough to make the news, but that's another story. Furthermore, it was all under Susan's orders that James hired a lawyer to try to discredit me. "You've done quite a lot for someone so young," I said, my tone a mix of sarcasm and disbelief. "For now,
What you two have done is a proper act of infidelity. That's why I'm divorcing James, and I'm going to make sure you two pay compensation in the divorce trial. After all, I have a skilled lawyer on my side,"
I declared, my voice filled with determination and righteous anger.
"Wait! Calm down.
James stammered, his eyes wide with panic.
It's impossible. And what you've done is also fraud, so you might get arrested. Well, I'll contact you again. Bye,"
I said, leaving those words behind as I left the house. After that, I successfully submitted the divorce application. And with that, this problem was settled for the time being.
Well then, I'll return to the office for now and take care of the procedures for compensation in the divorce trial,"
the lawyer said, his tone businesslike and efficient.
"Please do,"
I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me.
"Leave it to me,"
the lawyer assured me, his words filling me with confidence. After parting ways with the lawyer, I sent a message to James. Then, immediately, a call from James. Of course, I didn't answer that call. There were a lot of voice messages left, so I tried listening to one of them, and it was all about things I didn't care about, like,
"I don't want to pay compensation in the divorce trial and I can't get in touch with Susan."
About 6 months passed since then. Lisa successfully graduated from university and started a new life. But there was also something that surprised me.
"Actually, there's someone I want to marry,"
Lisa confided, her tone a mix of nervousness and excitement.
"Marriage!"
I exclaimed, my eyes widening in surprise.
"It's someone I've been dating since high school,"
Lisa explained, a smile spreading across her face.
"Since high school?"
I asked, feeling like one problem had been resolved only for another to take its place. It wasn't that I was against the marriage itself. It's just that, given what had just happened to me, I was worried about her partner. And when Lisa brought her fiancé to meet me, I was surprised again. Her partner was Daniel, Lisa's childhood friend who lived next door.
"I guess I have no choice but to allow this marriage,"
I said, feeling a mix of resignation and relief.
"Thank you, Mom,"
Lisa replied, her eyes shining with gratitude.
"I'm sorry for the timing."
Daniel apologized, his tone sincere and contrite. "You don't need to apologize. It's my problem, after all," I assured him, trying to ease his concerns.
"I will definitely make her happy,"
Daniel promised, his voice filled with determination.
"Please take care of her,"
I replied, entrusting my daughter's happiness to him. Then, I visited my parents' home to report the fact that I hadn't been in contact with them for a long time.
It's been a while,"
I began, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "It's good that you came back," my mom said, her tone warm and welcoming.
"This is Lisa,"
I introduced, gesturing to my daughter beside me.
"She's grown so much. Come in for now,"
my dad said, his expression a mix of surprise and fondness. I told them about my divorce and Lisa's marriage.
"I see. A report of divorce and marriage, how should I put it?"
My dad mused, his brows furrowed in thought. "It's kind of strange, isn't it?" I asked, feeling a sense of awkwardness hang in the air.
"It is,"
my dad agreed, nodding his head in understanding. We were both in a state of probing each other, but that gradually loosened up. I think our relationship has improved to the point where we can have casual conversations like we used to, with the distance between our hearts narrowing. Even so, to think that Lisa, who was still small, is already getting married. It feels kind of strange, my mom said, her tone a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. "So, what kind of person is her partner?" my dad asked, his curiosity piqued.
He's a childhood friend who lives next door. I explained, feeling a sense of pride and happiness for my daughter.
Oh?
My dad replied, his eyebrows raised in surprise. From there, the conversation continued to liven up with talk of Lisa's marriage. Dad's face also started to show more smiles. Even Dad, who had been so strict, had a softer expression on his face as he looked at Lisa, the grandchild he hadn't seen since she was born. It was then that it happened. "I'm sorry for everything until now," Dad said, apologizing to me.
"It's fine now. Hurry up and raise your head,"
I insisted, not wanting him to dwell on the past. "I'm sorry." My mom chimed in, her voice filled with regret. "Mom, it's okay now. I had my own faults too. It's not something for you two to apologize for," I assured them, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "Thank you," my parents replied, their voices filled with gratitude and relief. It seems that Dad had been carrying a sense of guilt ever since that day when we had almost become estranged. However, Dad was also stubborn, so he couldn't bring himself to contact me first. Mom, knowing Dad's personality, had apparently decided to leave the decision up to Dad. Then, perhaps because he felt relieved, tears welled up in Dad's eyes.
"Are you crying, by any chance?"
I asked, feeling a mix of surprise and amusement.
"Shut up,"
Dad retorted, his tone gruff but lacking any real anger. Touched by the genuine kindness of my parents, Lisa also looked happy. I think it was really good that we were able to deepen our bonds with our family once again. That night,
"I thought you would contact me,"
I said, picking up the phone with a sense of resignation.
"Then let's get straight to the point. Actually, I'm living in a hotel right now, and I'm running out of money,"
James began, his tone desperate and pleading. At this point, I could only sigh in exasperation at James, who could only say such things. "Oh, I see. That's rough," I replied, my tone dripping with sarcasm.
"What's with that reaction? It's like you're talking about some stranger,"
James stammered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Well, it's only natural. Because we are, in fact, strangers," I pointed out, feeling a sense of satisfaction at the truth of my words. "Don't you have any sympathy for your ex-husband?" James asked, his tone growing more desperate with each word.
"None. And you have your beloved Susan, don't you?"
I retorted, my anger rising to the surface once more. "She ran away a long time ago," James admitted, his voice filled with bitterness and resentment. According to James, things had been tough after the compensation was demanded in the divorce trial. Moreover, he was currently in the middle of a trial for fraud. Since it was a considerable amount, Susan apparently had to borrow her parents' help to pay. As a result, she ended up having to return to her parents' home and was placed under their supervision. "So, you were abandoned by a woman, and with no one else to turn to, you contacted me," I summarized, feeling a mix of pity and disgust. "Even a little is fine. Even $500. No, $100 is enough," James pleaded, his tone growing more desperate with each word. "I guess divorcing this kind of man was the right decision after all," I said, feeling a sense of vindication wash over me. "Anyway, I have nothing to give you. No matter how much you struggle, it has nothing to do with me. Well, do your best to live your life," I said, my tone final and unyielding. If James had seriously considered us, maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way, but there's no point in thinking about that now. It might have been a blessing that I was able to start a new life together with Lisa and her husband. I had intended to live alone, but I was happy when Lisa suggested that we live together. I don't know where James is or what he's doing to make a living now.
And that's fine. After all, I have nothing to do with him anymore.
Mom, what's wrong? You have a difficult expression on your face.
Lisa asked, her brows furrowed with concern. Really? I was just thinking about that man. I replied, my thoughts still lingering on the past.
Ah, that man. Don't tell me, do you still have feelings for him?
Lisa asked, her tone cautious and hesitant. I turned to her with a smile.
I don't have any lingering feelings. I'm feeling refreshed now,
I assured her, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. From now on, I will live a life that I find enjoyable. I will definitely make up for the time I spent on James, no matter what.
Laura here. Annabelle. Melissa. If you're there, please answer.
I banged on the door loudly, but there was no response at all. Just as I was about to leave, thinking they might have gone out, I heard the sound of a key turning. When the door opened, there stood my granddaughter Melissa. She looked anxious, but her face lit up when she saw me.
Granny!
She exclaimed briefly and hugged me tightly. I picked up Melissa and went inside. The room was eerily quiet, and Annabelle was nowhere to be seen.
Melissa, did Annabelle go out somewhere?
Melissa just nodded in response to my question. As we moved further into the house and reached the living room, I noticed half-eaten snacks on the table. I put Melissa down and asked her again.
It's lunchtime, but you were eating snacks?
Yeah.
When Dad's not here, Santa Claus comes and brings me snacks. Santa Claus? He comes on days when Dad's not here and brings lots of stuff. Mom looks so happy about it. But it's a secret from Dad. Because it would bother Santa Claus.
Hearing this, I became certain of something. Annabelle's flashy outfit the other day was for meeting this Santa Claus. I immediately started to search the house for evidence. I am Laura. I work at a cafe near my home. I lost my husband about 20 years ago, and since then, I have been raising my son Nicholas on my own. Since my husband's passing, the regulars at the cafe have been looking out for me in various ways. With their support, Nicholas grew up well and became independent as a working adult. I shared this joy with all the regulars. A few years after Nicholas started working, he married a woman named Stephanie, and they had my granddaughter, Melissa. Lately, my greatest joy has been seeing Melissa. She seems to have taken a liking to me, which makes me incredibly happy. My hobby is knitting, and I make sweaters and hats, gifting them to her whenever I can. Melissa, I knitted a sweater for you. Seeing the sweater I made, Stephanie also smiled warmly. Thank you as always. Melissa, make sure you thank her properly.
Thank you.
She held the sweater I gave her dearly, humming a tune as she took it to her room. Watching her back, Stephanie and I talked about Melissa's future. Everything was supposed to be fulfilling. But misfortune strikes suddenly. Stephanie fell seriously ill. I took care of Melissa instead, praying fervently every day for Stephanie's recovery. Nicholas, too, was busy caring for Stephanie and comforting Melissa whenever he could. We believed Stephanie would recover. However, after years of fighting the illness, Stephanie passed away. But there was no time to grieve. We still had young Melissa. With Nicholas busy at work, I started to go to his house to take care of her. Seeing Stephanie's resemblance in my granddaughter's face, I vowed to do everything to make Melissa happy. A few years passed by. I was at Nicholas's house, cooking dinner for Melissa as usual. Nicholas returned from work with a serious look on his face.
Mom, I need to talk to you, just the two of us.
He took Melissa to her room and returned alone after a while. I wondered what it was about. A bit anxious, I opened my mouth.
So, what's up?
Nicholas looked embarrassed.
Well, actually, I'm thinking of remarrying.
What? I blurted out loudly. Then covered my mouth, worrying Melissa might hear. Nicholas continued seriously.
Sorry, I know it's shocking. I didn't intend to at first. But thinking of the future, I worry about Melissa being lonely.
Indeed, Nicholas had a point. I'm taking care of her now, but there's no guarantee I can continue to do so. Melissa is still young, she might accept a new mother.
I understand. I'll support your decision. So, what's she like, the woman you're seeing?
Relieved, Nicholas smiled for the first time.
She's a junior at my company. She's been into me since she joined. She's really cheerful, I think Melissa will like her.
That's good to hear.
Actually, I'd like you to meet her before the wedding, if that's okay.
Of course. So the conversation progressed, and a few days later, I was set to meet Nicholas's fiancée. Her name is Annabelle, and just like Nicholas said, she was very cheerful. Throughout our conversation, her constant smile made me genuinely like her. When I first saw him at the company, I knew I liked him. I heard he lost his previous wife, but I didn't care and went for it. I aggressively pursued him. Anyway, she talked a lot. With her youthful appearance, she looked much younger than her age. I was worried about how Melissa would feel about Annabelle, but Melissa seemed to warm up to her quickly. Seeing Melissa so attached to Annabelle, I felt reassured that she would be all right.
Annabelle, please take good care of them. I'm here to help if you need anything.
I bowed as politely as I could, and Annabelle gave a thumbs up. Okay. Leave it to me. Afterward, Nicholas and Annabelle got married and started their new life. I wholeheartedly blessed their future and returned to my regular life. Working at the cafe, joking with the regulars, and knitting while watching TV at home. It was fulfilling, but I felt a bit lonely compared to the busyness of the past. At such times, I prayed in my heart to Stephanie. What would she say if she were alive? I thought about such things as I continued with my knitting. Several more years passed since their remarriage. One day, I went to give Melissa a sweater I had knitted, heading to the condominium where Nicholas and his family lived. Nicholas seemed busy with work lately, often away on business trips. With him not home often, I worried Annabelle might be overburdened with childcare. While delivering the sweater, I hoped to help Annabelle as well. Thinking about what to talk about with her, I headed to Nicholas's condominium.
What floor was it again?
Arriving at the condominium, I muttered to myself, standing in front of the elevator. Luckily, the elevator was just coming down. Third floor, second floor, as the lights blinked, and a sound indicated its arrival at the first floor. In contrast to the slowly opening doors, a woman hurried out. I glanced at her and was surprised to see that the woman was Annabelle.
Oh!
Annabelle! Startled by my voice, Annabelle let out a gasp and hopped a little.
Laura? You startled me! What are you doing here?
Sorry about that. I knitted a sweater for Melissa and thought I'd bring it over. Hearing this, Annabelle suddenly seemed unsettled. Her gaze wandered around, restlessly. I noticed that Annabelle was dressed very elegantly. Her outfit and makeup were perfect.
Are you heading out? Bad timing on my part.
Yes, I have a meeting with mom friends. So, Avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with the hand not holding her bag, Annabelle spoke. Annabelle seemed in a hurry. Regretting not contacting her in advance, I suggested. Don't worry about me, go ahead. Melissa is in her room, right? If I stay with her, you can relax and enjoy your time more. And so, I offered.
Just wait a moment. I can't impose that on you, Laura.
Don't worry about it. You probably need a break too. I'm just an old lady with too much time on her hands. However, she stubbornly refused my offer, and I felt something was off. Sure, I might have been overstepping. But was there a need for her to be so frantic?
The truth is, my apartment's a mess. I'm embarrassed for you to see it. That's why I don't want you to come in.
It's fine, really. I can help clean up. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, Annabelle snatched the bag with the sweater from my hand. I really can't have you here.
I'll make sure Melissa gets the sweater.
Please go home now. I'll contact you later." Then she pressed the elevator button. Even as Annabelle stepped in and the doors began to close, she kept a wary eye on me, making sure I wasn't following. As the doors closed slowly, I waved goodbye. Only silence remained. But my mind was anything but quiet. The season was about to turn to autumn, yet her attire was quite revealing. I also noticed a strong scent of perfume. I've met with mom friends myself, but never dressed so provocatively. Maybe times have changed, but Annabelle's attire seemed too intent on attracting the opposite sex. Moreover, the once bright smiling Annabelle didn't smile at all. Instead, she had a glaring look that concerned me. I wanted to chase after her, go to the apartment, and clear my doubts. But Melissa was there too. Not wanting to cause a commotion, I decided not to. I watched the elevator light ascend with a feeling of unease. With worries in my heart, I left the condominium quickly. That night, while knitting and watching TV, I suddenly got a call from Annabelle. I stopped my work and answered the phone. "Hello."
"Hello. Granny."
Melissa's innocent voice came through. Her voice instantly made me smile. "Melissa. It's been a while. Have you been well?"
"Yeah. And thanks for the sweater. I'll treasure it."
Her words brought relief. Annabelle had indeed given it to her.
"That's all right, dear. If you ever need another, I'm always here to knit one for you." "Really? That's so nice. Granny, you're like Santa Claus too."
The phrase "Granny, you're like Santa Claus too" oddly struck me. As if there was someone else giving gifts besides me. Yes, indeed. You're such a good girl, Santa Claus must visit you a lot. I subtly tried to confirm the meaning of her words.
"Melissa, don't say unnecessary things."
I faintly heard Annabelle's angry voice from the background. Unaware that I could hear her, Annabelle continued scolding in a stern tone.
"You've already said thank you, right? Hang up now." "Yes, okay. Sorry, Granny. I have to go now."
Melissa's voice was trembling. More than being upset about being scolded, she seemed frightened by Annabelle's voice.
"Understood. Call me again later."
With that, I ended the call and picked up my crochet hook again. The interaction between the two felt oddly strained for a mother and child. Due to a vague unease, I found it hard to continue knitting. Annabelle's flashy attire from the afternoon and Melissa's fearful voice from earlier. Could something troubling be happening? I knew I had to do something, but wasn't sure what. I sat motionless for a while, pondering my next move.
That's it. Nicholas. I should talk to Nicholas.
With his image in mind, I immediately grabbed my mobile phone and called Nicholas. He was on a business trip out of state, but it should be after work hours.
Please, pick up.
Luckily, Nicholas answered the phone right away.
Hello. What's up, Mom? It's unusual for you to call at this time.
I could hear a hint of tiredness in his voice. But I had no time to worry about that.
Hello, Nicholas. Are you okay? I need to talk to you about something. I'm fine, but what's wrong? Did something happen?
Sensing urgency in my voice, Nicholas's tone became serious. I told him about visiting the condominium with the sweater, encountering Annabelle in the elevator hall, and then about Melissa earlier. Nicholas listened quietly as I spoke. After I finished, he replied, I understand the situation. Indeed, it does sound concerning. He let out a deep sigh.
That's what I thought. I can't stop thinking about it.
While I was frantic, Nicholas seemed surprisingly calm.
What should we do? What if something happens to Melissa? Just wait a moment, Mom. Panicking won't help. I think Annabelle is just stressed because I've been busy. We shouldn't make a fuss about it.
Calmed by Nicholas's advice, I regained some composure.
You're right. I'm sorry for jumping the gun. That's okay. But we can't just leave it at that. I'll talk to my company and try to cut my business trip short. We can go to the house together when I'm back.
Indeed, it's better to act together rather than rushing in alone. I agreed with Nicholas's suggestion.
Understood. Let me know when you've decided on a plan. Yeah. But keep this a secret from Annabelle, okay? Talk to you later.
After hanging up, I let out a deep sigh. Nothing was resolved yet, and the unease hadn't disappeared. But hearing Nicholas's calm voice had indeed eased my mind a bit.
Nicholas has really grown up. I need to stay strong too.
Reminding myself of this, I waited for Nicholas's call with a shifted mindset. Soon after, Nicholas contacted me saying he could return earlier than planned. We arranged to visit the condominium together and hoped for the day to come quickly. All I could do was pray for Melissa's safety.
Stephanie, please protect that child. I beg of you.
I continued to plead in my heart. Finally, the day arrived. Leaving my house earlier than planned, Nicholas was not yet there. After informing him I'd enter first, I took the elevator to the apartment. Reaching the door, my heart raced. I mentally rehearsed what to say to Annabelle and braced myself before ringing the doorbell. I rang once, twice, but there was no response from inside. Unable to wait, I knocked on the door.
Laura here. Annabelle. Melissa. If you're there, please answer.
I banged on the door loudly, but there was no response at all. Just as I was about to leave, thinking they might have gone out, I heard the sound of a key turning. When the door opened, there stood Melissa. She looked anxious, but her face lit up when she saw me.
Granny!
She exclaimed briefly and hugged me tightly. I picked up Melissa and went inside. The room was eerily quiet, and Annabelle was nowhere to be seen.
Melissa, did Annabelle go out somewhere?
Melissa just nodded in response to my question. As we moved further into the house and reached the living room, I noticed half-eaten snacks on the table. I put Melissa down and asked her again.
It's lunchtime, but you were eating snacks?
Yeah. When Dad's not here, Santa Claus comes and brings me snacks. I decided to ask Melissa about the doubt that had been on my mind since the other day.
Melissa, who is this Santa Claus?
While eating the snacks, Melissa shook her head.
I don't know. He comes on days when Dad's not here and brings lots of stuff. Mom looks so happy about it. What does Mom say about him? Does she mention Santa Claus's name?
Melissa tilted her head in confusion.
I don't know. She always leaves with Santa Claus quickly. Only Mom comes back. So, Santa Claus visits often because you're a good girl. But Dad doesn't know, right?
Yeah. Dad's never met Santa Claus. Mom says not to tell Dad because it would upset Santa Claus. Hearing this, I was convinced that Annabelle was entertaining an unknown man while Nicholas was away. Presumably, that's what she planned when I tried to deliver the sweater. That would explain Annabelle's behavior at that time. And Melissa, receiving sweets and toys, really is believing in Santa Claus. A cheap way to keep her quiet. That's when I noticed Melissa's clothes were dirty.
Melissa, stay here for a moment.
I had a bad feeling. Looking around the house, my fears were confirmed. Dirty clothes scattered everywhere, unwashed dishes piled up in the kitchen. Carefully avoiding the mess, I opened the fridge. It was nearly empty, with only expired food inside. Shocked by the state of things, I returned to the living room. Melissa was gobbling up the sweets. Melissa, are you hungry? Haven't you eaten? I'm hungry because I haven't ate. That's why I like eating the sweets Santa Claus gives me. I hugged Melissa tightly, gently stroking her head. It's too much for such a young child to endure. How could I face Stephanie in heaven now? As I loosened my embrace, Nicholas arrived. Entering the room and setting down his bag, he sighed as he looked around. This is a mess.
Dad! Welcome back!
Melissa quickly left my side and hugged Nicholas.
Melissa, have you been a good girl?
Nicholas embraced her, gently stroking her head as I had.
Nicholas, can you watch Melissa? She hasn't eaten anything. I'm going to the supermarket to buy some groceries. Understood. I appreciate it.
I hurriedly left and bought essential groceries. Back home, I cleaned the kitchen and cooked a meal. Melissa ate hungrily. Meanwhile, Nicholas and I cleaned the room and secured evidence of Annabelle's infidelity. We discussed how to confront Annabelle with the truth. During our talk, Nicholas sensed Annabelle's return and retreated to the back room.
I'm home. You better have not done anything.
Annabelle entered, noticing me, and dropped her bag.
Laura! What are you doing here?
She looked around the room and went to the kitchen. And then approached me angrily.
Unbelievable. You just come in and use the kitchen? That's outrageous even for you.
Annabelle's anger didn't seem to subside. And then she directed her anger at Melissa.
Melissa! You opened the door for her. Why do you always do such unnecessary things?
Melissa dropped her chopsticks to the floor and clung to Annabelle's legs, crying loudly.
Mom, I'm sorry. I won't do anything bad again. Please forgive me. Annabelle, there's no need to speak like that. Melissa was waiting here hungry the whole time.
Annabelle, her face twisted in anger, let out a heavy sigh.
I don't need to be lectured. Melissa is my child. Laura, please don't interfere.
I clenched my fists involuntarily. Yes, her words weren't wrong. But I couldn't overlook this situation for Melissa's sake.
But this is like neglecting a child. I understand it's tough with Nicholas being busy. If that's the case, you should have asked me for help. Enough! Just leave now. I'll ask Nicholas to have a word with you. There's no need for that.
Nicholas, unable to bear Annabelle's harsh words any longer, emerged from his hiding spot. Annabelle was surprised to see him.
Nicholas, you're back already. That was quick. Was work all right?
Annabelle desperately tried to cover up her actions. But it was too late for such efforts. Still, Annabelle seemed oblivious, continuing to speak sweetly to Nicholas.
If you had told me you were coming back early, I would have cleaned up and prepared a feast.
But those words no longer had any effect on me or Nicholas. Nicholas signaled me with his eyes. Understanding immediately, I took Melissa's hand.
Melissa, you're full now, right? Let's watch TV together.
I took Melissa to another room and turned on the TV. Although she was sobbing, she soon became engrossed in the TV.
Melissa, watch TV for a bit. I'm going to clean up. Okay.
Leaving my smiling granddaughter watching TV, I returned to the living room. Nicholas and Annabelle were seated facing each other at the dining table. Annabelle had changed completely from her earlier coyness, now sitting quietly, looking down. Nicholas sat with his arms crossed, staring intently at Annabelle. I sat down next to Nicholas. Taking that as a cue, Nicholas began to speak.
So, can you explain what all this is about?
Annabelle bit her lip, not answering.
Listen, Annabelle. I'm not trying to blame you. I share the responsibility, too. I was too busy with work to help with childcare.
Then Annabelle suddenly looked up and glared at Nicholas.
That's right. It's all your fault for dumping everything on me. You're never home, and Melissa is a handful. It was hard. So, you cheated on him.
I calmly responded to Annabelle's defiant attitude. In her panic, Annabelle started blurting out things we hadn't even asked.
I did love Nicholas, you know. Since I joined the company. I thought Stephanie's death was my chance, so I married him, but now I regret it.
She continued, taking advantage of our silence.
But look at Nicholas. He's gotten old. Look at that belly. It's embarrassing. I'm disillusioned. I'm still young and I want to have fun. Is that too much to ask?
I involuntarily glanced at Nicholas. But he didn't seem particularly angry.
I get what you're saying. So, who is your affair partner?
A friend from my student days, Hugo. We happened to meet recently. He's still wonderful, unlike you. After saying this, Annabelle looked up at the ceiling.
I shouldn't have married. Melissa is becoming more like Stephanie and is not cute at all. But Hugo likes kids, so she was useful in that matter.
Suddenly, Nicholas slammed his fist on the table. Both Annabelle and I were startled and tensed up. Nicholas glared at Annabelle with anger-filled eyes.
You think because I don't say anything, you can keep this up? I was going to forgive you, but you keep spouting nonsense.
Annabelle seemed completely frightened by this side of Nicholas. I swallowed hard, impressed by his intensity.
Mock me all you want, but I won't tolerate you talking about Melissa like that. It's over. We're getting a divorce. I'll be seeking alimony, too. Wait.
Annabelle's complexion changed the moment she heard divorce. She realized she had said too much.
I won't divorce. I'll apologize for overstepping. I regret what I did to Melissa, and I'll break up with Hugo. Please forgive me. No, we're separating. Even if I forgave you now, you'd just do it again. My mind is made up.
I had never seen Nicholas with such a cold expression. Annabelle's anger flared up again at his unchanging decision.
Stop it. You just admitted it's your fault. I won't allow a divorce.
Hearing this, Nicholas slowly took out his mobile phone and placed it on the table. He operated the screen, and Annabelle's voice started playing. As soon as she heard it, she became silent and seemed to come to her senses. Her earlier statements echoed through the room.
As you can hear, I recorded your voice. I have evidence of the state of the room and your affair. So, there's no chance of winning for you.
Thus, Annabelle finally compromised and accepted the divorce. For the time being, I took custody of Melissa. It was decided because Nicholas was busy, and it was deemed unsafe to leave her with Annabelle. During the divorce mediation, I started taking Melissa to the cafe with permission. The regular customers were smitten with her and even helped look after her. When I explained the situation to them, one of them, a former detective, suggested filing a criminal complaint. With enough evidence, it would be possible, he advised. I immediately informed Nicholas, and we began preparations for a criminal case. Simultaneously, the divorce mediation also progressed smoothly. Thanks to the evidence we had secured in advance, Nicholas successfully gained custody. I am truly glad I consulted with Nicholas at that time. Regarding alimony, since Nicholas also had some fault, the amount wasn't significant. However, Annabelle couldn't afford it, so her parents agreed to pay on her behalf. Subsequently, Annabelle was arrested. Following the trial, she is now incarcerated. Melissa was anxious until the turmoil settled, but she quickly cheered up thanks to the regular customers and our emotional support. On my recommendation, Nicholas moved to a nearby neighborhood. He's still busy with work, so when he's on business trips, Melissa stays at my house. Our greatest joy is doing knitting together and watching TV. Melissa increasingly resembles Stephanie. Seeing Stephanie's reflection in Melissa's smile, we are all living a happy life.
I'm pregnant, so give me $3,000.
Laughing mockingly, Sierra extended her hand. I instinctively brushed it away.
There's no way I'm giving you that. And why does it have to be such a high amount?
To my question, Sierra sneered. Cute kids cost money.
You wouldn't understand. That kid's surely going to be cute like Sierra. Unlike someone, she's probably going to be a beauty.
Sierra and Rodney burst into laughter. I felt like my anger was about to explode. I just couldn't bear it anymore. Unintentionally, the words I'd been holding back slipped out.
Actually, about that kid.
As soon as they heard my words, Sierra turned pale, and Rodney looked shocked. Things went a bit differently than planned, but you could say it's a smooth start. But the real revenge starts now. They'll have to pay for what they did to Sis. Let them cry all night after losing everything. Well, that still wouldn't be enough for me. They might as well enjoy themselves for now. Because those smiles will soon fade away. Smiling to myself, I distanced myself from the quarreling Sierra and Rodney. My name is Hannah. I'm 33 and I work in a design office. Talking like this might give off a stylish, urban impression. But the reason I chose this path isn't so simple. To be honest, this was the only choice I had. That's the right way to put it. Actually, I have an older sister named Daisy. Daisy is 2 years older than me and could do anything. Compared to Daisy, who excels in both studies and sports, all I could do was draw. Illustration was the only thing I didn't lose against Sis. That was my only solace. But, don't get me wrong, it's not like I had a bad relationship with Daisy or my parents. My parents loved me equally, and Daisy and I still keep in touch frequently. That's why, when Daisy got divorced 4 years ago, I couldn't hide my shock. Moreover, the reason was Rodney's affair, and the other woman was my best friend, Sierra. Sis. I'm sorry. I'll cut ties with Sierra. The day I declared that to Daisy still haunts my dreams. I'll never forgive Sierra. That's how I still feel inside. By the way, I met Sierra when we were in elementary school. We were the same age and became classmates for the first time in the upper grades. Of course, being in the same grade, we knew each other's names and faces. But we never really had any contact. And that's why we never talked before. I'm Sierra. Nice to meet you. Sierra had a very refined appearance. Her voice was cute, and every gesture was adorable. Being approached by such a cute classmate, I became nervous. What's wrong? Well, it's just that you're so much cuter than me. Me? Really? Sierra asked, looking back at me. I nodded slightly. In that moment, Sierra hugged me and whispered in my ear with a smile. I think you're cute too. Be confident. Really? Yeah. Let's become best friends. And that's how we became best friends. Since then, Sierra was always by my side. When I was talked about behind my back at school, it was Sierra who defended me first. There are kids saying bad things about Hannah, but let's not do that. Sierra said confidently in front of our classmates. As expected, the classmates fell silent. The reason I was talked about, in fact, was because of Daisy's presence being known. Initially, many friends would say things like this to me. It's so cool to have a sis who's good at studying. Being the starting player, that's awesome. I was happy when Daisy was praised. It didn't bother me. But, those words of praise for Daisy turned into backhanded comments about me. Her sister is terrible at both studies and sports. Being good at drawing, isn't that kind of lame? Of course, no one would say it to my face. They talked in whispers, hidden in the corners of the classroom. But, of course, I could hear them. However, it was the truth, so I couldn't deny it. It was frustrating, but it was the truth. All I could do was bear it. But, maybe sensing how I felt, Sierra spoke up for me. Moreover, perhaps to prevent the issue from lingering, Sierra didn't single out the culprits. That approach worked well, and the people who talked about me disappeared. Thank you, Sierra. We're best friends. Of course I got your back. Our bond grew even stronger. However, I learned the truth about that incident a year ago. It was during a reunion after a long time. A friend told me this story. The bad-mouthing about me was instigated by Sierra. She defended me to gain my trust. Hearing that, I felt like my heart was about to burst with regret. If I had seen through the lie at that time, maybe Sis wouldn't have divorced. Since learning that fact a year ago, I've found it even harder to forgive Sierra. Let me say this again, I only found out about this fact a year ago. So until the moment I heard about Daisy's divorce, I always thought of Sierra as my best friend. Even as we grew older, I believed Sierra was my best friend. That's why I accepted everything Sierra said without any doubt. You have a talent for illustration. You should definitely pursue that path.
Really?
Do you think so?
Go for it.
Sierra encouraged me. Thinking so, I enrolled in a design-focused university. Looking back, it might seem laughable. But back then, I believed Sierra's advice. However, there was one good thing. It was that I truly had a talent for illustration. After enrolling in university, my design talent blossomed, and I landed a job at a design office with top grades. On the other hand, Sierra joined a modeling agency after graduating high school. But she didn't make any spectacular achievements. She appeared in fashion magazines. But only a few times. That marked the end of Sierra's modeling career. Nonetheless, it's undeniable that Sierra was beautiful. As if leveraging her good looks, Sierra switched careers to a major apparel manufacturer. Then she started working as a salesperson at a clothing store the company operated. Being a former model, she indeed boosted the store's sales significantly. Thus, Sierra became a popular salesperson. Hearing the rumors, I visited Sierra.
Sierra, you seem to have become quite popular. Hannah, you came to see me.
Sierra rushed over. Being mindful of the surroundings, I nodded slightly.
By the way, how's your job, Hannah?
Web design and stuff, pretty challenging, but I guess it's fulfilling.
I see. Then I'll have to work hard too.
I thought she'd be down after quitting modeling, but she seemed just fine. As I was thinking, Sierra leaned in and asked, "So, what are you here to buy today? If it's a new collection, I can help out and choose for you."
No. It's not that. I'm actually looking for a present for Sis.
2 years older, right? Is it her birthday or something? Sierra smiled. I replied a bit shyly.
Actually, Sis, she's getting married.
Marriage?
Congratulations! Thank you, but I'm not the one getting married.
Right.
Sorry.
We laughed together. Then I talked about Daisy's marriage. Daisy, who had just turned 28 a few days ago, went out for a meal with her partner Rodney. There, Rodney proposed to Daisy. Of course, Daisy accepted. Having heard the story the day before, I decided to celebrate Daisy's marriage. And after much deliberation, I finally decided to gift Daisy clothes. Considering the upcoming wedding preparations and meetings, Daisy would have more occasions to go out. So, I was wondering if there's any nice outfit.
I see.
Let me choose for you. Do you have a photo or something of Daisy? Show me. Sierra extended her hand. I sent a photo of Daisy, stored on my mobile phone, to Sierra. It was a picture Daisy had sent me. It probably had been taken during a recent date. The impressive illumination in the background was a hot topic, and it was a photo I particularly liked.
This illumination. It's really popular right now.
Yup, exactly.
We were talking about going there since everyone's buzzing about it.
I stopped mid-sentence and instinctively clamped my mouth shut. But it seemed too late. Sierra was looking at me with a laugh. Then, putting her hand to her mouth, she asked me,
I heard we were talking about going there. Do you have a boyfriend by any chance?
Well. My ears turned red with embarrassment. Having a boyfriend was a first for me. Sierra, who had been with me since elementary school, knew that. Of course, Sierra seemed happy for me. But all of it was just an act. When Daisy got divorced and I confronted Sierra, she confessed. Moreover, the photo I sent at that time turned out to be the catalyst for Sierra and Rodney's affair. And on top of that, Sierra had already known for a few days that I had a boyfriend. Apparently, Sierra had witnessed me and my boyfriend Denny on a date a few days before. She was plotting to steal Denny from me. This too was a confession from Sierra. In short, if I hadn't brought up Daisy's marriage, Sierra would have tried to take my boyfriend away. Because I showed Rodney's photo to Sierra, Sis ended up divorcing. It goes without saying how much I regretted it, even though it was done unknowingly. Nonetheless, oblivious to everything, I presented the clothes chosen by Sierra to Daisy. Daisy was really pleased and even prepared for her wedding wearing that outfit. Looking back now, I believe that was probably the happiest time for Daisy. After a while, Daisy got married, but she gradually became gloomier. Since we both lived alone, we used to contact each other frequently. However, shortly after the marriage, Daisy started to contact me less often.
Maybe she's enjoying her married life?
I thought lightly. Then, unusually, Daisy called me.
Rodney might be having an affair.
Daisy's voice was terribly somber. I tried to comfort her desperately.
What do you mean? Are you sure it's not a misunderstanding?
I don't think it's a misunderstanding. He's been coming home late, and he's not even home on his days off,
Daisy said and finally broke down in tears. In my eyes, Daisy always seemed like a strong person. But that Daisy was crying now. It made it clear to me that she was not okay.
Calm down, sis. Let's get to the bottom of this first.
I proceeded with an investigation into Rodney's conduct. If they could reconcile, that would be best. That's what I thought, but it backfired. The investigation I initiated led Daisy to discover Rodney and Sierra's affair. Hearing that fact, Daisy and I confronted Sierra together.
Sierra, what is this all about?
What?
There's nothing to it. Rodney and I are dating. That's all. But he's Sis's husband. Doesn't that make it an affair?
I confronted Sierra with a strong tone. But Sierra seemed unfazed.
An affair, sure, but what's the problem?
He prefers a beautiful woman, obviously. Sierra glanced at Daisy. Daisy quickly looked down. Indeed, Sierra was more beautiful than Daisy and I. But if you consider what's inside, Sierra is overwhelmingly inferior. At any rate, Sierra, who could cheat without remorse, was much uglier than Daisy. The argument with Sierra escalated, but she remained defiant throughout. Realizing we were getting nowhere, I decided to confront Rodney next. Rodney, too, was just as defiant.
Of course, I prefer beautiful women. When I'm seen with them, everyone envies me.
Rodney, do you really mean that?
Yeah, I mean it.
I prefer beautiful women. But I couldn't bring myself to ask why he married Daisy in the first place.
It's fine. I'll be reporting the affair to both of your companies. What? If you do that, we might lose our jobs. You should have thought of that before you did it.
I said it loudly. Sierra seemed a bit shaken, but Rodney remained nonchalant.
Hannah, you're so naive. An affair won't cost us our jobs. What? Unless it's a crime, an affair is a personal matter. It's a marital issue, so the company won't get involved.
It's true the company might think it's unsightly. But an affair isn't grounds for disciplinary action. I later found out that unless there are specific internal regulations, generally, affairs don't lead to disciplinary action. Sierra laughed triumphantly. And Rodney smirked disgustingly.
Well, that's the situation. The only thing you can do is break up with me,
Rodney said to Daisy. Daisy looked down, seemingly frustrated.
What are you so proud of? That's...
Before I could finish my sentence, Daisy grabbed my arm. In a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz, Daisy said,
"It's okay, Hannah. If I can get away from Rodney, that's enough."
In the end, Daisy got a settlement from Rodney through the divorce and left him. After that, Rodney apparently started dating Sierra. But I didn't care. I couldn't forgive Rodney nor Sierra. In place of Daisy, I vowed to seek revenge on the two of them. That was the only thing I was determined about. For years had passed since then. I never forgot about them for a moment.
The stage is set, now, brace yourselves.
On a certain holiday, I made up my mind and headed to a boutique in a bustling district. As I entered the store, I heard a female salesperson's voice. But I ignored it and approached two customers.
It's been a while.
Sierra. When I spoke, the woman turned around.
What? Hannah!
The surprised shopper was Sierra. Rodney next to her also turned around.
Oh, it's Hannah. You haven't changed much, or should I say, still unpolished.
I was irritated, but getting angry here would ruin the plan. I kept my cool and continued.
Both of you seem well. Sierra, have you gained a bit of weight? What? No way. I'm pregnant.
Sierra retorted. This reaction was as expected. This is where the Real challenge begins. I braced myself to continue, but before I could speak, Sierra said this.
I'm pregnant, so give me $3,000.
Laughing, Sierra extended her hand. I instinctively brushed it away.
There's no way I'm giving you that. And why does it have to be such a high amount?
To my question, Sierra sneered. Cute kids cost money.
You wouldn't understand. That kid's surely going to be cute like Sierra. Unlike someone, she's probably going to be a beauty.
Sierra and Rodney burst into laughter. I felt like my anger was about to explode. I just couldn't bear it anymore. Unintentionally, the words I'd been holding back slipped out.
Actually, about that kid.
As soon as they heard my words, Sierra turned pale, and Rodney looked shocked. Things went a bit differently than planned, but you could say it's a smooth start. But the real revenge starts now. They'll have to pay for what they did to Sis. Let them cry all night after losing everything. Well, that still wouldn't be enough for me. They might as well enjoy themselves for now. Because those smiles will soon fade away. Smiling to myself, I distanced myself from the quarreling Sierra and Rodney. Then Sierra noticed me distancing myself. Pointing at me, Sierra raised her voice.
Why would you say such a thing to Rodney? That child isn't Rodney's child. What's that about?
Oh? But isn't it true?
It's definitely Rodney's child. We got married after all that.
Her loud shout drew the gaze of everyone in the store toward us. I glanced around a bit before stoking the fire further.
Is that so? Then that child's father is one of your affairs, right? But...
As Sierra tried to retort loudly, Rodney cut in.
Stop slandering! This child is mine. Are you going to ignore the fact that your wife is cheating, Rodney?
When I questioned Rodney, his face turned bright red.
Don't lie without any evidence. You're just trying to stir up trouble. That's right. Stop messing around.
Sierra also retorted with a flushed face. It's about time. I thought, looking around.
Well, causing a scene in the store is troublesome, so let's leave it at that. What? You started this. You know what? I'll sue you for defamation.
Rodney laughed.
That's a great idea. We could probably get about $10,000 out of it.
Even Sierra agreed with Rodney's suggestion. I sighed and responded.
Suit yourselves. But what if I actually have the evidence? What? Do you really have evidence of Sierra's affair?
Well, who knows?
I'll tell you the answer when we meet next.
Bye for now. With that, I quickly left the store. Behind me, I could hear Rodney's shouting voice.
Hey! Wait! We're not done talking.
I pretended not to hear and quickly moved away from the store. A few hours later, I was at home while changing clothes. My phone rang unexpectedly.
I knew you'd call me.
I answered the phone with a small laugh. Immediately, Rodney's voice rushed in, speaking rapidly.
Hey! About Sierra's affair, is it true? Answer me.
He reacted just as I had anticipated. I couldn't help feeling pleased. Doesn't he realize it's a trap? I sighed softly and responded.
The child in her belly might be yours, but there's also a good chance it belongs to her lover. So, the affair is real?
You're free to think that. I answered provocatively. After a brief silence, Rodney spoke in a low voice.
You have evidence, don't you? If you want, I might even give it to you.
I had directly accused Sierra of having an affair. Meaning, Sierra would now be on guard, making it impossible to gather further evidence of her cheating. So the evidence I might possess becomes Rodney's only hope. He's thinking exactly as I planned. Considering this, Rodney responded.
What should I do? What are your terms? Money?
Of course not. I just want revenge. If you leave Sierra, that's enough for me. Needless to say, that was a lie. I have no intention of forgiving Sierra, nor Rodney. But for now, I'll pretend to cooperate with Rodney. Only for the sake of what's to come.
Understood. So I just need to leave Sierra, right? It's simple, isn't it? If you get evidence of Sierra's affair, you'll gain freedom and a settlement from the divorce trial. Yeah. Let's meet and talk somewhere. Then, how about this coming Sunday?
I suggested a restaurant in the entertainment district. It has private rooms, suitable for confidential conversations. After specifying the place, I hung up the phone. Immediately after, Sierra called.
What's the meaning of this, Hannah? Why didn't you answer my call?
I'm busy too. I can't be at your beck and call.
Don't act so high and mighty.
I could hear Sierra grinding her teeth. I almost laughed.
So, what are you going to do about it? Because of you, Rodney and I are fighting.
That's not my problem. It's your fault, isn't it? Sierra is to blame for the affair. That's what I meant to say. But Sierra didn't care about that. She retorted sharply.
When are you going to take responsibility? Or maybe I should really sue you. Is that something a friend would say? Too bad, we're not friends. You said so yourself.
Sierra raised her voice in anger. I distanced the phone slightly. And then responded with a sneer. Oh right, that's what I said.
You're really infuriating. I should have made you cry more when we were in elementary school.
Sierra was breathing heavily. I thought, this is it, and played my trump card.
Oh? In that case, maybe I should just throw this away? The evidence of Rodney's affair. What? Rodney's affair?
Sierra's tone changed. Smirking at her reaction, I continued.
I couldn't find evidence of your affair, but I did get evidence of Rodney's. What do you mean?
Today's incident was a ploy to anger Sierra and make her call me. The real target is Rodney, who betrayed Daisy. I'll give Sierra the evidence of Rodney's affair. So, she can squeeze every penny out of Rodney through the divorce settlement. I made the whole thing up. But Sierra believed it.
All right, send me the evidence then. You want to meet and talk, right? How about this Sunday afternoon at a cafe? Fine. Bring me the evidence then. I'll make sure Rodney pays.
After hearing Sierra say that, I hung up the phone with a sneer. Then, the next Sunday. As the time to meet Sierra approached, I left the house.
The car's ready. Let's go.
Denny, who had left the house earlier, opened the car door. I got in with a smile. After getting out of the car, I headed alone to the cafe where we agreed to meet. Sierra was already there when I entered.
Sorry for being late.
That's fine. Just show me the evidence already. Sierra extended her hand. I looked towards the entrance. Seeing the person there, I smiled and said to Sierra,
Before that, a friend is here. Do you mind if he joins us? Is it your boyfriend? Denny, right? Close one. We're married now, so Denny is my husband.
Saying that, I gestured towards the entrance. Sierra also looked over, laughing. In that moment, Sierra turned pale. At the same time, a loud voice filled the cafe.
Sierra! You're back in the States!
A man approached from the entrance. He was slightly older than us, dressed in a suit.
What? Why is Alexander here?
Well, a friend wanted to introduce me to his wife. The man referred to as Alexander turned around. And there was Denny. Denny spoke to Sierra. Nice to meet you, I'm Denny, Hannah's husband. I brought your affair partner. Hearing those words, Sierra stood up. As she tried to flee, I grabbed her hand. What's the matter? He's your affair partner, right?
Introduce him. He's the father of your child in your belly?
The child in your belly? Alexander looked at Sierra's pregnant belly. Then he burst into joy.
You're pregnant with my child. That's why you said you were going abroad.
By the way, Alexander is definitely Sierra's affair partner. Moreover, Sierra lied about going abroad. In short, she was trying to hide her pregnancy and the birth of her child. Because it would be troublesome if a man who's not her husband showed up at the hospital. But then, Alexander realized something. He slowly asked Sierra.
Didn't someone mention me as your affair partner just now?
No.
It's about someone else.
Sierra started making excuses while getting flustered. So, I decided to step in.
It's all a lie. Sierra is married, and you are just an affair partner. Don't be fooled. Hannah, don't stir up unnecessary trouble.
Sierra tried to grab me, but in that moment, Alexander intervened.
Sierra, what's all this about?
Well, it's... Sierra started to say something, but Denny interrupted by showing a photo.
This is Sierra's husband. The rest is for you two to discuss. We'll be leaving now.
Denny took my hand, and we left the cafe. Later, I heard the cafe turned into a battlefield. Meanwhile, Denny and I headed to a nearby restaurant. Just as we arrived, Rodney also showed up.
Perfect timing, but who's that guy? He's my husband, Denny. I remember you had a fiancé.
I didn't want to have a long conversation right there, as it could lead to complications. I hurriedly urged everyone to enter the restaurant. Inside, we were led to a private room in the back. But then, the waiter said something unnecessary. Your companion is waiting inside. He said.
Is there someone else inside? A lawyer?
Well, kind of. It wasn't entirely wrong. I casually answered and entered the private room. Immediately, a woman's shrill voice was heard.
I've been waiting for you, Rodney. What? Layla!
Rodney seemed utterly shocked, nearly collapsing on the spot. Denny quickly supported Rodney. Then the woman called Layla spoke again.
Thank you for helping my fiancé. Well, it's nothing.
By the way, who might you be? Layla tilted her head. Her gesture was innocent as a young girl's. I felt it was cruel to make her cry, but I didn't hesitate to declare.
I'm Hannah, the sister of Rodney's ex-wife. And this is my husband, Denny. Oh, is that so? But why would the ex-wife's sister be here? Because I'm the one who invited you all here.
As soon as I said that, Rodney started to make a scene.
Shut up! Don't say anything unnecessary.
I won't say anything unnecessary.
I'm just going to tell her that you're already married.
The atmosphere froze at that moment. But I continued calmly.
After leaving my sister, Rodney remarried my best friend. Quiet! Don't say anything more!
Rodney continued to cause a commotion. Then Layla raised her voice.
Please be quiet. We're in the middle of a discussion.
Overwhelmed, Rodney closed his mouth. Seeing this, I continued.
Then, hiding the fact that he was already married, he started a relationship with you.
I narrated Rodney's current situation, his infidelities, and everything else. And ended with the fact that Rodney's current wife, Sierra, was pregnant.
So, you're saying I was being cheated on? Layla asked.
Well, yes, that's how it appears.
Regardless, it's good timing. My father is also here, so we can have a thorough discussion.
Layla gestured behind her. Looking back, there was a man with a fiery red face. So, that must be her father. I thought, and then Layla suddenly raised her voice.
You do know my father is a lawyer, right? Rodney, are you prepared?
Layla glared sternly at Rodney. Rodney, slightly intimidated, began to make excuses.
It's not like that. My wife Sierra has been cheating, and I was planning to divorce her. So, you're not yet divorced? No. I mean, that's enough. I will sue you.
Layla declared, and at that moment, Layla's dad grabbed Rodney.
So you're the father? Nice to meet you.
Rodney tried to smooth things over with a greeting. But it was futile. The room erupted into chaos, so Denny and I retreated outside. There, I told the staff who had rushed over due to the commotion.
There's a disturbance inside. Please call the police.
With that, the staff member called the police. The police arrived promptly. Later, we were also questioned, but ultimately it was treated as a family dispute and ended with a stern warning. However, while most were let off with that, it was not the end for Rodney. The police involvement became a problem at his workplace. Of course, the cause of the disturbance was thoroughly investigated. As a result, the affair came to light. Naturally, an affair alone would not lead to dismissal. But the company took issue with the police involvement. In the end, Rodney was pressured to submit his resignation and reluctantly left the company.
It's your fault. What are you going to do about it? If you feel bad, lend me some money. If you keep bothering me, I'll call the police, okay?
After that, he never contacted me again. It seems he really learned his lesson. Later, Rodney was sued by Layla and had to pay a hefty settlement. Sierra also had troubles with Alexander. Though she avoided a lawsuit, she was still required to pay compensation. Burdened with debt, Rodney and Sierra blamed each other and decided to divorce. They're now engaged in a bitter divorce battle. I doubt either will get any money in the end. By the way, to cover the legal costs and living expenses, they're both working at a well-paying construction site. I hope this time they truly reflect on their actions. Meanwhile, I reported the whole saga to Daisy over the phone.
That must have been tough. Are you okay, Hannah?
I'm fine. So, sis, just focus on delivering a healthy baby. Actually, after her divorce, Daisy remarried a former classmate she met at a reunion. She moved far away, but we still keep in touch frequently. Daisy is due to give birth soon, and thinking about it made me want a child too.
Maybe I'm pregnant too?
I gently stroked my stomach. It felt a bit warmer than usual.